Coming up on this episode of the Hockey Nuts, Steve and I get you caught up with all of the news of the week around the hockey world. The Matt Duchene saga has finally come to a conclusion with one of the biggest trades we've seen in years. We'll tell you how the teams involved and proved themselves in one way or another. Two teams are headed to Sweden to play a couple of games, and the Rangers and Bruins played their first head-to-head matchup this season. We'll have all the details of all this, plus the Minor League Hockey Minute, the NCAA Hockey Minute, and our picks of the week coming up next. This is the Hockey Nuts Podcast, Season 2, Episode 13, recorded on Thursday, November 9th, 2017. Duchene finally gets a new home.
Shut up and sit down.
Bergeron jumps into the circle, keeps the puck alive. Pastrnak couldn't twist it all the way to the corner. Krug sticks it away from Granlund. Bergeron in transition over to Pastrnak on his off wing to Krug. The one-timer scores! David Pastrnak gets Minnesota's attention again, and this time Krug finds the back of the net. The Bruins have blown it open 4-1. The draw, McCallum. Shot taken, stop the rebound, scores! Derek Ryan! Hansen out of midair, and Carolina has a 2-1 lead.
Meanwhile, to the outside, Buchnevich with one that trickled wide, but was grabbed off and thrown back to the point. A bouncer all around, ricocheted off Rasmussen. They scored! And now scrambled Jimmy Vesey, and it's 2-1. Nash denied at the line. The follow-up from Sarnik, though, trying to play it on through Connaught and Vesey, product of Belmont Hill and Harvard. Dropped that one back in, and Miller goes back and is shouldered off heavily there to the boards. It comes free for Desharnais, who did that. Got it to Vesey, then on back. Shattenkirk, the shot. Rattled around, rebound, score! Vesey again!
Leddy across the blue line. Leddy still has it, drops it back for Tavares, checked by McDavid, but Tavares got the puck for Barzal, and here's an opportunity. McDavid and Draisaitl. Leddy back, Draisaitl moving in, drop pass, McDavid scores! Connor McDavid, overtime winner!
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of season 2 of the Hockey Nuts Podcast. My name's Wayne. I'm here once again with Steve. How's it going tonight, Steve?
Going great, Wayne. Good to be with you. Good to be able to talk hockey. Hasn't been that long since you and I did it before, but boy, has it been a great week.
Yes, it's been an extremely busy week around the hockey world.
Yep.
And there's tons to talk about. Yeah, we're basically recording on our normal Thursday night. And last week we also recorded on Thursday night, so we're basically at our normal schedule, or supposed to be our normal schedule anyway.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, we've got a lot to discuss. A lot has gone down. Just a couple of things that I've seen come across the headlines. Of course, we have a big trade to talk about. Matt Duchene finally, that whole saga has come to a conclusion, so we'll have the details on that. The Bruins and Rangers played their first head-to-head game of the season. We'll talk about that. The 2017 SAP Global Series is going on in Sweden this week. We'll give you some details on what's going on there. There were tons of upsets in the college hockey world over the past weekend, and we'll get you some details on that. And, of course, we'll have all of that plus some fantasy hockey at the end of the show, and we got a whole bunch to talk about. So let's get let's get things started here. First and foremost, we've got to talk about our teams.
Yes.
And I'm going to let you start because they had a fantastic week.
I tell you, Wayne, when I sat here last week and they were getting ready to play the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we did the podcast early, because I I'm a confident guy, but my team was really shell shocked and had trouble and stuff. If you'd have told me, well, Steve, you can breathe easier because the Rangers are going to win all 4 of these games. If you'd have told me that, I'd have laughed you out of the door. I would have said you got it wrong. But by golly, that's what they did. We won 4 games, and it's really changed our whole. As we sit here right now, and I'm knocking on wood, let me tell you. But as we sit here right now, the Rangers are in the playoffs as a wild card team if they started tonight. And, of course, we're very early on in the season. But
there's a long way to go.
They have a long way to go. Yep. They dug themselves out of a hole, and they are completely out of that hole right now.
Yeah, what have they won? 5 in a row now?
5 in a row. 5 in a row. And they are now 8-7-2. 18 points, and unless I don't know if there's an early day game today. Last night when I went to bed, they were one of the wild card teams, so they dug themselves completely out of a hole. And if they're good, and I'm sure they are, they dismissed from their mind whatever problems they had, the number of losses, the games they should have won, all that's gone. They just start from here and build, and hopefully that's what happens. But I mean, to get into it real quickly. We beat Tampa Bay last Thursday night 2-1. It was an overtime game, but I think that was by far Henrik Lundqvist's best game of the year, and we played as a team better in that game than I have seen us play against a very, very good Tampa Bay squad. They could have won that game, but we hung in there. We played great against them. We got a few breaks. So did Tampa Bay. But that by far out of all these games, that was the real, charm of the week. Because I think after that game, I don't think they've lost again. They just keep going on beating teams.
Yep.
But Vasilevsky won 9 in a row. So that was really something. The next night we 2 nights later, we beat Florida in overtime again. A game I felt we should have won in regulation, but it was overtime. And then Columbus on Monday night, who's playing very well. And we really, again, played an excellent game against that team and won 5-3. And then the game last night against Boston, I'm willing to let you talk about that in your segment. But we did win 4-2. So, I'm very happy, Wayne, and we'll see where from here.
I certainly want to get your take on the game last night. I didn't get to see it because I had to work until 10 o'clock. By the time I got home, the game had just ended when I walked in the door. So, but I had the game on because at that time of night, pretty much after 7 p.m. At my work, I can get away from the customers and the sales floor and go and do some work that needs to get done behind the scenes. And I had my earbuds in during that point of the evening, so I was able to listen to most of the game anyway. So I have the radio quote unquote view of the game, and you actually sat and watched the game, so you probably have a better take on what actually happened in that game versus what I heard from the Boston radio guys.
Oh yeah. Well, I can tell you that Henrik Lundqvist, again, played a very good game. He did give up 2 goals, but he played extremely well. But I finally, Jimmy Vesey broke through. I mean, he's had it really tough. I've seen games where he's made some incredible, Jimmy Vesey's a good stick handler. You watch him play. He's quick. His hands are very fast, and he skates well. He skates, He's always making good passes. He's not one of those guys that's lackluster, which you'll see out of Kevin Shattenkirk every now and then. He'll pass the puck and no one's there. But anyways, finally last night he was able to put the puck in the net a couple of times, And I thought he was the best player for us. I really do, even though he scored 2 goals in like 30 seconds. If you looked at the game as a whole, he was a great player last night. And
it's almost like he got up for that game against Boston.
it really, you know what, Wayne? I echo that. I think that's exactly right. I think he was ready to play against the Bruins.
Yep.
And he took it personally. That's how it looked like to me watching the game.
There seemed to be a lot of players in that game last night that have roots either in New York or in Boston. Of course, Shattenkirk's from New Rochelle. He's the hometown boy. That's a big story all year, how he signed with his hometown Rangers. Last night on the Bruins side of things, Charlie McAvoy, he's from Long Beach, New York originally. So he basically had this game scheduled on his calendar as a game that he wanted to play, and he was looking forward to playing that game for the first time. His first game against the Rangers. He grew up a Rangers fan. In fact, I saw a picture of one of the fans in the Garden held up a big poster that essentially had a tweet from Charlie McAvoy that he tweeted out couple months before he got drafted, before the draft. And the tweet says something to the effect of, "I really hate the Boston Bruins." It was a tweet from Charlie McAvoy.
Well, listen, if you grew up pulling for the team, you'd say that too.
Yep.
You'd say the same thing.
Well, he grew up a Ranger fan, so
sure, you'd say that. You'd say, sure, you would. But I think. There's a lot of roots. A lot of commonality in these two teams now.
And then you've got, and then you've got, Kevin Hayes and Jimmy Vesey, both guys from Boston playing for the Rangers. So there's just a lot of players that have roots in either city involved with these two franchises,
and a lot of familiarity.
Yep.
I felt in the Tampa Bay game this week, if you saw Jimmy Hayes, and I know we're going to talk about it later on, they were trying to get under the Lightning's skin the whole game. And Kevin Hayes he's actually, he's got to be careful, but he was one of the main culprits of doing that. But in the Boston game, that wasn't the case at all. In the Boston game, it was just as you said. We're up for this game. Boston was up for the game. They were, both teams wanted to win that game, because of their commonality, their roots, and the similarities that we have now as two teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yep. Yeah, the take I got from of course, I listened to the Boston radio feed, of course, because I got to listen to my Homer guys, and the general take that they had on the game is Boston didn't play very well in the first period. Obviously, they came out of the first 3-1 down. But they just didn't play well, especially defensively. They just didn't take care of their own house for the most part in the first period. But then they got better as the game went on, and by the third period, they were really
had me worried.
Really taking it to the Rangers there in the third period.
Yep.
And they almost tied the game, but Henrik stood on his head and played a fantastic game and shut the door and kept Boston out of it. So. But, the other thing we haven't talked about is the Boston Bruins and their injury problems. And that was a very battered lineup that was facing the Rangers last night. There's so many players out with the Bruins that it's mind-boggling how many injuries they're going through right now.
That's true. And Mike Milbury stepped in for Eddie O last night, and he said it this way. He said, people say, well, you can't sit there and whine about the fact that your players on the ice. Oh, yes, you can. He was like, oh, yes, you can. When you can't field your A team and the other team doesn't have any injuries to speak of to their team, you're not looking at the real picture of what can happen in a game, because you don't have, one of the teams doesn't have their Class A team on the ice. And I 100% agreed with him.
Yeah, well, it's one thing. It's one thing if you're missing one guy or two guys. Well, the Bruins aren't missing one guy or two guys. They're missing 5, 6. I mean, they're missing a line and a half, 2 lines worth of players.
I'd hate to think what would have happened to us last night if Brad Marchand was in there.
Yeah.
I would have hated to have thought around
Krejci didn't play either.
The number of pucks that Henrik did not get could not get prevent. It was a rebound right in front of the net.
Yeah.
With Brad Marchand in the game.
Yeah.
There was a number of times where noticeable lapses of the players that Boston normally has made a big difference.
Yep.
Made a big difference.
Yep.
So
that's game one. And you know what, Steve? I also noticed this morning, now, since we've been doing this podcast, the Rangers are now 4-0 against Boston.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
I haven't been keeping track.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know we won the one game last time, or maybe we went to two games where we ate chicken wings, but I thought you guys beat us last year at least once.
No, I think the Rangers swept them last year, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Rangers swept them last year. I think the Bruins took them to overtime one game, or maybe even two. So the Bruins might have gotten a point or two out of these 4 games, but ultimately the game has gone to the Rangers in each game since we've been doing this podcast. So I'm sorry, we're just going to have to end this thing.
I listen. We came into that game with a lot of confidence too, and still barely won.
Oh, they're playing really well right now. The Rangers are.
They're playing good. They got everything clicking together.
They're clicking. They're healthy. They're back on track. Yeah. And
Kevin Shattenkirk is the difference and the power play is doing very well. I don't know that it'll continue at 30. Was it 35% or 30? I don't think it's going to continue at that number, but Kevin Shattenkirk is the difference in that.
Yeah.
He really is.
I mean, they really are firing on all cylinders. Beating Tampa Bay, that was a signature win for them for the whole season. Never mind the week. So,
right.
And then the win in Tampa Bay, Florida, of course, they're a team dropping like a rock, but Columbus is still good. Boston. I'll be happy if Boston can stay 500 until they can get healthy at this point.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. But let's take a look at Boston's week, other than the game from last night. Of course, they lost last night to the Rangers 4-2. And, of course, that was, the game was 3-2 right to the end. Then Rangers got that empty netter. But prior to that, they had a 5-3 win against Minnesota back on the 6th. And then they lost 3-2 against Washington on the 4th. And then they had a 2-1 win versus Las Vegas on the 2nd. And the thing that's jumped out at me with the Bruins over the past week is just the overall inconsistent play. But I really do attribute that to the youth of the team. They're just guys that are still learning, number one, how to play together, number two, how to win at this level.
Right.
Most of these guys have played together, if they have played together in the American Hockey League, but just never played together in the NHL. So you're seeing inconsistent efforts and inconsistent results with the games. So the win versus Vegas and the win versus Minnesota, the Bruins played very well most of the game. The Minnesota win was kind of a bit of a scary one because they had the lead 4-1 at one point, and then they let Minnesota crawl back into the game, and it ended up 4-3 at one point, and then they got the 5th goal there at the end. That was they've had a few games like that where they've taken the lead and they just don't know how to put teams away, and
right.
They've managed to escape with the win, but it wasn't a full 60-minute effort. Same thing with the Vegas win, and Washington was just a poor effort overall. They looked sluggish. They looked like it was just a lackluster effort against the Capitals, and which was disappointing because the Capitals are probably showing that the weakest team that they've had in a probably 2 or 3 years, and I felt the Bruins had a chance there to really take advantage. And as it turned out, they ended up losing that game, and that's actually the 10th win in a row for the Capitals against Boston.
Really?
Going back 3 or 4 years, yeah. Washington's beat Boston 10 games in a row. And, well, this was win number 10, so that was a rather disappointing night there. So, yeah, an up-and-down week for the Bruins. They ended up getting 2 wins, 2 losses on the week. But on the bright side, out of the last 9 games the Bruins have played, they have gotten at least 1 point in 7 of those games.
Yeah.
So they got a lot of overtime losses there,
right.
but it mixed in there. So the win and loss, the feeling on the ice is kind of sucky. But
last night there was significant contributions in terms of shots on net, passing the puck, cycling the puck, working the puck inside, working plays from Danton Heinen, Austin Zarnik, Charlie McAvoy. Yep. Your youth is making big contributions in the game. In fact, had me scared last night in that third period.
Anders Bjork played pretty well last night, too.
Played out of his mind. He's fast as lightning. Yep. He might be as fast as Michael Grabner. He's that fast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
extremely fast.
He's fun to watch, for sure.
Yeah. And, so I would be very encouraged by that. If it was me, I saw the youth of your team really stepping up and making a statement. And as I said, I really didn't know whether we're going to come out with a win last night in that third period.
Yep. Yeah. So, this Bruins team this season, just from the games I've watched up to this point in the season, of course it's still early, although we're 20% through the season already. We say it's early, but we're almost 15 games in already. So, but this is going to be a frustrating team to watch. If you're a Bruins fan and you're watching the team from night to night, it's going to be frustrating because the team is young. They're going to make mistakes, and some of these mistakes are going to cost them games.
Right.
But like you said, I'm very encouraged at the long-term future of the team.
Right.
With a lot of these prospects that they got coming up, they've got some in the lineup now that are playing. They've got some still down in American League that have yet to have a chance to play that are going to be good for the future. If they could keep this core group of 10 or so young, very good prospects together, in 4 or 5 years, this team is going to be the Chicago Blackhawks. I really believe that.
I think so too. Pasternak had a great game last night. I mean, you could go on with the young guys on your team that are really.
You just got to be patient and wait for the team to develop. Unfortunately, Boston fans are not known for their patience.
Right, but that's true.
They want to win now.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You're right.
So yeah, just a frustrating week overall. But at this point, with all the injuries that they got, as far as I'm concerned, if they can just stay at that 500 mark for the next couple of weeks here until they get some of these players and some of the key players back, the Krejcis and the Marchands, and getting these key players back and get them healthy again and get everybody firing on all cylinders again. If they can just hover around 500 until then, at this point, that's all we can ask for. Because the players that the Bruins are relying on right now are not guys they should be relying on. They shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. And I saw one article earlier, maybe it was a week or two ago, where somebody had done the math, and the lineup that Boston's putting out there right now, they said the average age was somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 years old. But if you take Chara out of that and average the rest of the players, it's like 24. Yeah. That is extremely young.
Yeah, you're a young team.
Extremely young. So, so with that youth comes, everything that comes with it. They're going to make mistakes. It's going to cost them games, but they're going to be fun to watch.
Right. Good
and bad. So, all right. Now, the Carolina Hurricanes, the other team we follow pretty closely, and they had kind of a light week this week. In fact, they're right there with Boston as two teams that have played the fewest number of games so far this year. And Carolina had 3 games last week. They had a 5-3 loss at Colorado back on the 2nd. They had a 2-1 shootout loss at Arizona on the 4th, and then a 3-1 win versus Florida on the 7th. Now, I didn't get to see the 5-3 loss at Colorado. I think I was working that night, but I saw highlights of the game, and it was just overall a disappointing result, although the effort seemed to be there.
Right.
And the same thing with Arizona.
Yeah, that one hurt.
That one hurt because obviously it was Arizona's second win of the season. And when you got a team that is playing as poorly as Arizona is, unfortunately for them and their fans, the other teams really need to get 2 points out of those games.
Oh, yeah.
And Carolina did. So they only managed 1 point out of that game. They at least managed 1 point, and they had to score pretty late to tie that game at 1 in order to get that point. But they did manage 1 point out of that game. And then that 3-1 win against Florida was just an overall very strong effort. They outshot them. I can't remember what the totals was, but I think they got almost 50 shots on net. They may have gotten more than 50 shots on net on Florida in that game. It was just an overall good effort. But I think the overall theme of the Carolina season so far this year is we're seeing the effort more so now than they have in the recent past. The team seems to be trying harder. They're pushing. They're just not getting the results.
Right.
They're just not. The final score is not coming out.
That's right.
The same.
That's right. I see Carolina as, in my mind, they've taken a step up because of the work that they've done in the last few years to improve. But on the ice, they're not taking that step up yet.
Yeah.
And maybe they're in the process of taking the step and it's about to happen. The shoe's about to fall. But it's just not happening right yet.
Yeah. Right now they're continuing to dig themselves in a hole for the season. Not as bad as the last several years.
Right.
Like the last 3-4 years in particular, Carolina has in each season has dug themselves a deep hole in October that they've had to scratch and claw to get out of, and of course, they haven't made the playoffs since 2009. No need to remind Carolina fans that. They know that all well. But they've never been able to dig themselves out of that hole. This season, they're still kind of doing that because the results aren't there, but the effort has been there where I can't say that has been the case in the past where they kind of look lackluster in years past. This year, I really haven't seen that from the team. They are trying. They're pushing hard in every game. Every game is close. I haven't seen a blowout game yet this year. Now they've had, I remember one game was a 5-1 game there last week, I think it was, where they lost 5-1, but it really wasn't a 5-1 game. It was 2-1 till 3 minutes left, and then the wheels fell off. The games are close with Carolina, which hasn't been happening. So they're getting there, but they're just not quite there yet.
Right.
And they've dug themselves a bit of a hole, but it's not too late to climb out of it. But at the same time, they got to get going.
Right, and it's not a deep hole.
No, it's not a deep hole.
We climbed up from the depths. We were 4 games under 500.
Yeah.
Okay. And won 5 in a row to pull it back up. And
but it took
if it was any later in the season, forget it.
Yeah. And it took
a
a 5-game winning streak just to get them there. And even there, the Rangers are sitting in that 8th spot.
Yeah.
So they're in the playoffs now, but it took a 5-game winning streak just to reach that 8th spot.
That's right.
And
you can't let up now.
And now they can't afford to let up. They still need to go.
Yep.
Because there's 2 teams that are just a point behind them, and 3 more teams that are only 3 points out. So yeah, it's still very close. Carolina is at this point sitting 5 points out of a playoff spot behind the Rangers, but they have 4 games in hand on the Rangers.
Yeah.
So, and they're only 4 points back from Detroit with 3 games in hand on them. So they have the games in hand. Carolina does.
Yeah.
They've only played 13 games. Everybody else has played 16 or 17. So that is a good thing for Carolina in that they do have those games in hand. But man, they got to get things going, and they are sitting right at that 500 mark at 5-5-3. So, so they're further ahead than they were in years past. But we're not seeing. We were expecting a little bit better than this from them, and I think it's, and it's certainly not for a lack of trying. So. All right, well, let's take a look at some of the other notable games that have happened over the past week. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to see as many games as I wanted to this week because just, we all have lives and work and, all that stuff. If I could get paid to watch hockey games, I would, I'd watch every game. But, unfortunately, that doesn't pay the bills. So, But were there any other games that jumped out at you that
I watched a few games this week, but I sat down, Wayne, really to study the New Jersey Devils. 2 or 3 nights ago, they played the St. Louis Blues at the Rock, and I was like, why is this team doing so well? And they didn't do well. They didn't play very well at all in that game. They did jump out to a 1-0 lead. When Blake Coleman, and you'll remember Blake Coleman, he's the guy that drinks the pickle juice.
Oh, okay, yep.
He scored their first goal. And they were ahead 1-0 for a while. But St. Louis chipped away, smacked away, forechecked away, and got back in that game and then won it 3-1 going away. I think that team is going to fade. I don't see them staying where they are right now, leading, aren't they? They're leading the Metropolitan Division, or they're at least tied for it.
Well, they're sitting in a playoff spot. They're sitting in that number 2 spot, so right behind Pittsburgh.
Okay, Pittsburgh is ahead of them. Okay,
but they have 3 games in hand on Pittsburgh, and they're only a point behind them. So,
yeah, they're playing up until this point they played very well, but they did not play well that night. And I see them as a team that defensively, they're relying on Corey Schneider. He's got to play a tremendous game for them to win. That's what I saw the other night. It's like there are breakdowns on the defense. And St. Louis is a great team. I mean, you're looking at they could win the Stanley Cup. They're a very, very good team.
Yep.
But they're playing very well. But it doesn't matter. I just saw breakdowns defensively where people weren't sticking their man, passes across the slot line. Corey Schneider's having to stand on his head to stop pucks and rebounds, all kinds. It just didn't look like a very the team that is doing so well. And I see them as well. We got Corey Schneider in net, so we're going to be okay, And I don't think that's going to last.
It's like the mentality they had when Martin Brodeur was there.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's not as good as Martin Brodeur. So.
Yeah.
So,
well, he's still pretty good, though, Schneider.
Corey Schneider's, don't get me wrong, but he's going to have to play out of his mind.
Yep.
The whole year for that team to keep doing what they're doing. And I just don't see that happening. I think they're going to fade. And that's the one game I wanted to – I really sat down and looked at it. In addition, I watched Winnipeg again is playing out of their minds, man. They're a great team, though. They have a lot of weapons now.
Yeah.
And,
I've been watching over the past week or two a lot of West Coast games because I've been working a lot of 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. shifts at work. And then, of course – I ref a lot, so I get home at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So my whole daily routine is kind of shifted a little bit to a much later, later routine. So I'm up late at night a lot. So I've been able to catch a lot of the West Coast games. And man, these games, the Ducks and the Sharks, and the Ducks and the Kings playing each other. Man, those have been some entertaining games.
Yeah,
the Kings and the Ducks just played a game. What was it, Sunday night that they played each other? Wow, what an entertaining game that was! It had playoff intensity. I mean, they had. Man, it was
fights.
Fights. I mean, you name it, it had it. Jonathan Quick getting into it with some Ducks players, and then. Unfortunately, the Ducks goalie, Josh Gibson, got kind of dinged up a little bit in one of those games, and he ended up having to leave the game, and I guess he's still out. I don't know if he suffered a concussion or what, but he got hit right in the face with a puck, and then in the whole thing, he got hit in the face with a puck. His mask pops off, hits the ice, and then just after that, somebody's stick or whatever hits him in the head too. So he got a double whammy there. So,
what do you think about the Los Angeles Kings, Wayne? After what we said at the beginning of the year, everything's got to go right for that team if they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, everything's got to go right, and so far everything has gone right for them for the most part. I mean, they're what are they now? They're 11-2-2. 11-2-2. Yep. But yeah, I mean, the biggest things I noticed about the Kings is that young rookie that they've got there. What's his name? Kempe, Adrian Kempe.
Yeah.
Talk about fast. Man, is he a good player.
Yeah.
He has been a huge surprise for, well, Kings fans anyway. I'm sure the Kings brass knows exactly what they had in him, but he has been playing extremely well and has been providing them with a lot of the offense that, everybody questioned where are the Kings going to find all their goals from. They can't get it all from Kopitar. But
who's playing well.
Yep.
He's not, versus last year.
Yep. Kopitar is playing better. Dustin Brown is playing extremely well this year.
Yep.
It's like he turned back the clock there a few years. He's gotten back to at least the Dustin Brown that we knew when the Kings were winning Stanley Cups.
Yep. It's kind of like the guy that goes up into his attic. He knows he's got the lantern that he uses when he goes on the camping trip, but he hasn't been able to find it in a while. So he goes digging around, and all of a sudden he finds it. Oh, there it is! And all of a sudden the Kings just boom, they're back, and it's the Stanley Cup Kings on the ice every single night.
Yep,
you got it back, and you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And that's what you're watching. And I'm telling you, the Kings, I told you at the beginning of the season, if everything goes right, they can do some damage.
Yep.
They have all that pedigree. They have the Stanley Cups, and those guys, and led by Drew Doughty. I mean, he is, if ever there was a determined guy on the ice, Drew Doughty is a determined player. He really is.
Yep. Yeah, he's having a fantastic season so far.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you got, like we mentioned, Dustin Brown, Tyler Toffoli's having a great year, 12 points already.
Yeah.
In just 15 games. And of course, we mentioned Kempe with 7 goals already, rookie. So he's probably one of the leading candidates for the Calder so far this year. Doughty, I mean, they're just getting contributions up and down. Mike Camilleri is having a good start to his season.
Absolutely.
So yeah, things are going well for Kings. The question is, will they be able to keep it up for the whole season?
And real quickly too, John Stevens. It's like he has entwined himself very well so far with that team as the new coach.
Yep.
They're not missing a beat, and Stevens seems to. Of course, he was assistant there for a while, right? So it's not like he came in from an outside, not knowing the team at all, coming in from Philadelphia or somewhere on the East Coast and taking over. He was assistant there, right, under Darryl Sutter?
Yes, I believe so. Yep.
And so he steps in, and he knows the players, he knows the potentials, he knows the system. He's got it all, So.
Yep. So yeah, LA is firing on all cylinders out west. St. Louis, of course, we mentioned they're 12-3-1 so far already this season. They're firing on all cylinders. Winnipeg, how about the Winnipeg Jets?
Yeah, they're fun to watch, aren't they?
Yep.
They really are. And Patrick Laine, I'm telling you, you could see it where with Austin Matthews, and of course he's hurt right now. But that Toronto team, they go for a few games and they're really hot and very confident, and then they settle back and they sit a few games they stink. And then they go for a few games, but it seems like you see Winnipeg just consistently each game building on what they have. They have the weapons. They have the defensive player. They have the team together. I don't know how well they are in net, but right now it doesn't seem to matter. They seem to be building on each one of their games, whether they win or lose, and improve.
Hellebuck in net is putting up some good numbers. He's 8-0-0 right now.
Yeah,
2.12 and a .936 save percentage. Now, right now, the problem facing the Winnipeg Jets is the goaltending situation. Behind Hellebuck, they're getting no contributions from anything. So, Steve Mason is their backup there. He has yet to win a game, so they're kind of facing the same problem the Bruins had last year, where if anybody other than Hellebuck's in net, they're not going to win the game. So
right.
But they're getting. I mean, Blake Wheeler's off to a huge start, 21 points in 14 games.
Right.
Which every time I see Blake Wheeler putting up huge points, it ticks me off because the Bruins had him and let him go.
Yeah.
They couldn't afford to keep him. Mark Scheifele is having a great year. So yeah, the Jets are off to a really good start. And that was one of those teams that was kind of a bubble team for us too.
That's right.
Who we said depending on how they do, they could either make the playoffs or not. So
right.
So they look like they're off and running to a good start. And of course, all the teams that we expected to be good, Nashville is pretty much right there amongst the best teams in the league.
Right.
You've got Vancouver still playing fairly well, although they're not as hot as they were at the very start of the season, but they're still sitting in a playoff spot, so that's a good thing for them.
Brock Besser.
Yep.
Playing awesome.
Yeah, he had a hat trick the other night there.
Yeah.
San Jose is playing very well. Chicago's kind of struggling a little bit, though.
Yeah, they are. They had fallen in the standings. I watched a game of theirs, but it's been 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they're down to 7-6-2 now.
Yeah, they've taken a let up there.
Yep.
And I that one I still say Corey Crawford's got the experience, but they're not. They don't have the. I would not put Corey Crawford in the top 3 goalies in the NHL right now. He's not. So, and they play in that Central Division where you better have a good goalie.
Every game's a tough game. Yeah,
it's a tough game. Yep.
Yeah, and then, of course, Arizona continues to struggle. Edmonton is showing signs of coming out of their skid, but they're not quite there yet. They did win their most recent game against the Islanders. They won that game 2-1. A fantastic goal by Connor McDavid in the overtime. I don't know if you saw that, but
I heard about it. I did not see it.
Kind of a give-and-go play where he was going up the ice, and the defender focused on him. He kind of dished it off to his winger, and then the winger, as soon as the D slid over to cover that winger, the winger, and I think it was Draisaitl that was going up the ice with him. I can't remember exactly who was up the ice with him, but and then he fed it back to McDavid, and McDavid roofed it right up under the right up over the shoulder, up under the crossbar,
right,
for the overtime winner. So that was an interesting ending. We'll put it that way. Entertaining for sure.
That's who we got to play Saturday. So we'll see.
So yeah, but Edmonton is showing signs of coming out of their skids. So watch out for them for sure. Now back in the East, of course, we've talked about Carolina, Boston, and the Rangers, but Tampa Bay is still firing on all cylinders. Toronto is struggling.
Yes.
4-6 in their last 10. Mm-hmm. After jumping out to basically a 6-1 start. So, and the big problem there in Toronto is they can't keep the puck out of their own net. They're getting plenty of offense.
Right.
In fact, I believe they are leading the East in offense, 65 goals, but they've given up 60. So, so they've got to figure out what's going on there. And I don't know if we're going to have a trade there in Toronto or not. because they're expecting a Stanley Cup in that city.
Yeah.
Of course, they've been expecting that for how many years? For
50 years since they last.
Yeah.
1967.
67. Yep.
That's what it goes back to.
67. Yep.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. I wanted to make a note on them because people are saying that they're struggling, yet they're in first place in the Metro. They've played 17 games, most of any team in the league. Of course, there are a couple other teams that have played 17, but they're tied for the most in the entire league. But they're 9-6-2 in those games, and people say they're struggling. The thing that jumps out on me with Pittsburgh is their -14 differential. They've got 45 goals for, 59 goals against. And we've talked about this particularly last year, is looking at that goal differential is kind of a good indicator on how well a team is playing.
Right.
Overall. And where they would expect to be. And at the end of last season, it was almost perfect.
Yeah.
With the exception of one or two teams, that the teams that ended up with a plus goal differential made the playoffs. Teams that ended up with a minus goal differential missed the playoffs.
Right.
It ultimately almost happened perfectly last year. There was one or two exceptions, but that's it. Yeah. Out of 31 teams or 30 teams last year.
Yeah.
And that -14 is got to be very concerning if you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan.
Right.
Because, they're winning games. They're finding ways to win. But they're, when they lose, they're giving up a lot of goals. They're getting blown out a lot. So
yeah, I watched them get blown out.
Yep.
One night by Winnipeg.
Yep.
So you're right. Oh God, you can't.
And they're really only in first place, and due to the fact because they've played so many games, they're 1 point ahead of New Jersey, but New Jersey has 3 games in hand, and they're also 1 point ahead of Columbus, but Columbus has a game in hand on them as well. And then looking down the list, the Islanders are 2 points back, but the Islanders have 2 games in hand. And the Rangers are only 2 points back. So, it's a logjam again in the Metro.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's going to be that way the whole year.
It probably will.
Yeah,
it probably will. So, but and the other note of the teams, Florida is dropping like a rock right now in the standings.
Yeah, they are.
Buffalo as well.
And
neither team is playing very well right now.
They're not gelling. Of course, when you watch the Rangers play them there in Florida, it's like Madison Square Garden Jr. It really is. If we score a goal, it is like being at Madison Square Garden. There are thousands of Rangers fans at those games, so it's a heated game. It really is. And you don't get a true picture of that team, but they are. I mean, we went into overtime against them. And I'm glad we won the game.
Yep.
Trying to win there is not easy. Winning in Florida is not easy.
Yeah. And they are struggling at the gate too. We were seeing that a couple of years ago that they were having a hard time at the gate.
Right.
Getting fans in the seats. And then they got good for a couple of seasons there, brought in Jaromir Jagr, who probably single-handedly put a few thousand seats or butts in the seats every night. Yeah. But he's not there anymore. Yeah. And they're struggling once again to get fans to go to the games so far this season. And, of course, Carolina, we all know their struggles at the gate. I was very disappointed when Florida played. I was watching the game, Florida playing Carolina at Carolina. How many empty seats there were, because these are two teams that are struggling to get fans to come to the games.
Yeah.
And how empty that building was in Carolina. And I was ranting to my son. I'm like, damn it, we're going to lose our team. We're going to lose our team if things don't change.
Yeah.
It was making me upset.
I hear you, Wayne.
Because I don't want to have to drive to D.C. to go watch a hockey game.
Yeah, me either. You're not kidding. Yeah, I don't want to go there. I tell you that right now.
Because that's the closest city that has NHL outside of Carolina.
Yeah.
If we lose the Hurricanes, we're going to have to drive to D.C. to go see a game.
That's right.
So that means we'll be taking in many more AHL games if that happens.
That's right.
Because
that's right.
Charlotte's a lot closer.
Yeah.
Although there's no telling they probably won't keep the Checkers there either. They'll probably move them. Anyway, all right. Well, let's talk about some of the headlines that have happened over the past week, starting with transactions. And there's one big one that we got to talk about.
That's right.
And that's the Matt Duchene trade. And the article that I have reads, center Matt Duchene was traded by the Colorado Avalanche to the Ottawa Senators on Sunday as part of a 3-team trade that also sent Kyle Turris from the Senators to the Predators. Duchene dressed for Colorado's game at the New York Islanders and played a minute 59 in the first period before being removed from the game. I'm excited, Duchene said as he was walking out of Barclays Center to get into a car that would take him to the airport for a flight to Ottawa. I'm extremely grateful for my years in Colorado. It was my favorite team as a kid, and it was an absolute honor and privilege to play here. It's bittersweet for sure, but I'm excited for a new opportunity in Ottawa. It'll be amazing to be close to home. They've got a team that can win a Stanley Cup. I'm really excited to go there, and just nothing but a pleasure to have played here for Colorado. Senators sent goaltender Andrew Hammond, their first-round pick in the 2018 NHL Draft, and third-round pick in the 2019 NHL Draft, and forward Shane Bowers, their first-round pick, 28th overall in the 2017 NHL Draft to Colorado. Nashville sent the Avalanche a second-round pick in 2018, 19-year-old defenseman Samuel Girard, a second-round selection in the 2016 NHL Draft, and forward Vladislav Kamenev, a second-round choice in 2014. Turris, whose 5-year, $17.5 million contract expires after this season, extended his contract to another 6-year, $36 million contract that will keep him in Nashville through the 22-23 season. Duchene, who's 26, had 10 points in 14 games with Colorado this season, including a goal and assist in a 5-4 shootout win at Philadelphia. He had 41 points and was minus 34 in 77 games last year when Colorado finished last in the NHL with 48 points. Duchene was taken by the Avalanche in the first round, third overall in the 2009 NHL Draft, and has played his entire NHL career with Colorado. He has 428 points in 586 games. Turris, who's 28, has 9 points in 11 games for Ottawa this season. He scored an NHL career-best 27 goals last year and finished with 55 points. He has 320 points in 544 NHL games with the Senators and Coyotes, who took him in the first round, also third overall in the 2007 NHL Draft. Whew. A lot going on here.
There is. That's a very complicated trade, Wayne.
Yep, and I found, and I'm going to pull it up right here so I can look at it again. I found on capfriendly.com how they simplified the trade a little bit easier for us. They actually broke it down into 2 separate deals, and this may be how it actually went down when they, in terms of the paperwork that goes on behind the scenes. So, all right, follow this. So, first you had a trade between Ottawa and Nashville, okay?
Right.
Nashville gets Kyle Turris. Ottawa gets from Nashville Samuel Girard, Vladislav Kamenev, and Nashville's 2018 second-round pick. Okay? Mm-hmm. Ottawa, in the next transaction, turns around and flips those 3, Girard, Kamenev, and that second-round pick, and sends those 3 to Colorado, and in return, Ottawa gets Matt Duchene.
Right.
Okay? Now, in addition to those 3 that came from Nashville and went to Colorado, Ottawa also adds their first-round pick next year, their third-round pick in 2019, and Andrew Hammond and Shane Bowers.
Right.
Okay? So, all in all, when the news of this trade first came down, I think you either sent me an email or tweeted me or messaged me or something. You said, okay, Matt Duchene got traded, and he goes to Ottawa. And my first reaction was, great. Now Ottawa gets better. Because, I was mad at being a Bruins fan. Ottawa is a divisional opponent. I'm like, oh, man, look how much better Ottawa is going to be now that they have Duchene. I didn't know at the time that Turris was leaving Ottawa and going to Nashville. So, to me, all that is, Ottawa gets an upgrade from Turris to Duchene.
Right.
So, center for center. Turris is a couple of years older. Duchene is a little bit better of a player. So, Ottawa gets an upgrade at center, but they're not any deeper per se. Okay?
Right.
Nashville, on the other hand, gets a huge upgrade at their center position, which they've been struggling at. They don't have enough depth at the center position. Turris being added to their team gives them, and they didn't really lose anybody off their current roster.
Right.
For Turris. So Nashville gets better probably immediately, more so than any of the other two teams involved in this trade. Now, Ottawa gets slightly better by trading Turris for Duchene, but Nashville, huge upgrade here because they're getting Turris for essentially nothing. Now, I'm not saying nothing because they mortgaged their future to get Turris is what Nashville did. But in terms of this year's team, if you look at this year alone, Nashville's a much better team today than they were before this trade.
Agreed.
And Ottawa is a slightly better team now than before this trade.
Right.
Now, Colorado, of course, in the near term, they're a much weaker team than before this trade by losing Matt Duchene. But, man, what they got in return. I mean, if you
they got the Hamburglar out of that. Remember Yep. You never know there. But yeah, they're a weaker teem.
Colorado in the near term is a much weaker team than they were before this trade. But in the long term, man, did Joe Sakic clean up on this one. I mean, he gets an extra first, a second, and a third-round pick out of the deal. Hammond, I wouldn't call him a prospect. He's more of a, because, he's, I don't know how old he is. He's 29 years old. He's getting up there in age, but Bowers was a first-round draft pick, 28th overall this year. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, a first-round draft pick you would expect to be down the road a good player. Samuel Girard right now amongst the experts, so to speak, they're saying is the best current player to come from this draft. He's a second-round selection in the 2016 draft, so he's a year older than Bowers. And then Kamenev was also a second-round pick. So basically they got, in terms of picks, they got a first round, a second, and a third that have yet to been chosen.
Right.
They've got, in terms of the players, they've got 2 more seconds and a first.
Right.
I mean, wow. Did they get a lot?
They got a lot. And if they finish in last place or they're going to be picking right up there.
They're going to be picking up there, yeah. They're going to be a weak team again this year. They're not going to stay. Right now, they're sitting in a playoff spot, but they're not going to stay there forever, especially if you don't have Matt Duchene in your lineup anymore, your best player. But, yeah, kudos to Joe Sakic for getting what he got.
Right.
Because he held out for a long time, almost a year on the calendar, because he wanted to get as much as he could from Matt Duchene.
Right.
But, yeah, kudos to Sakic for getting what he got because he cleaned house in this trade. In the long term.
I agree.
In the long term.
Yep.
So, and then in the short term, Nashville and Ottawa both gets better in the process. So, yeah, very complicated trade. Probably the most complicated trade I've seen in a long, long time.
Yep. And the biggest trade since P.K. Subban for Shea Weber.
Probably.
There's no question about it, you know?
Yep. Probably.
I mean, that's a game breaker trade.
Yep.
So
yeah, this was the major story of this week. And then lo and behold, Matt Duchene plays his first 2 games Friday and Saturday night with his new team. Guess who they're playing against? The Colorado Avalanche.
That's right. And yep.
So yeah, it's huge trade. I like the trade mostly for Colorado in the long term. I think Sakic did a good job at shoring up a lot of their problems. Now, granted, they still have to pick decent players with those 3 picks that they picked up, in addition to their own picks that they still have. But I think 5 years down the road, you're going to see a pretty competitive team there in Colorado. I think they'll look back at this trade as being a franchise changer.
Right.
So, all right, let's move on. That was the only big transaction I saw of the week. I didn't see any other trades per se. And of course, we had the usual call-ups, call-down, send-downs, that kind of stuff. A lot of that stuff. Looks like Lee Stempniak is starting to get back on the ice for Carolina. He got sent down to Charlotte for some conditioning. So he looks like he's getting close to coming back. So, yeah, but I didn't see anything in particular that was earth-shattering. All right, let's move on to injuries. Anaheim Ducks center Ryan Getzlaf had surgery to repair a broken bone in his cheek and could need up to 2 months to recover, General Manager Bob Murray said Tuesday. Murray called the injury a complex fracture of the zygomatic bone in Getzlaf's cheek and said screws were needed to stabilize it. Getzlaf, who's 32, hasn't played since October 29th, when teammate Corey Perry's shot was redirected by Carolina Hurricanes forward Sebastian Aho and hit him in the face. 23 seconds into the Ducks' 4-3 shootout win. Getzlaf played 6 more shifts in the first period after returning from the locker room, but did not come out for the second period. God, he played after that. Yeah. Getzlaf, who's Anaheim's captain, had 7 points in 6 games. He missed the first 2 games of the season, and then 3 in a row from October 13th to 20th with a lower body injury. These injuries piss me off. You know that? They really do.
It's another one of those preventable injuries.
Totally preventable.
Yeah.
If the players would just wear proper face protection. But you can't get them to do it because, 50 years ago, nobody was wearing helmets, never mind face shields.
Right.
Including goaltenders. So
that's correct.
Actually, you probably got to go back further than 50 years.
Jacques Plante.
You probably got to go back 70 years to get to the pre
goalie. Andy rearranged his nose.
Yep.
And that did a lot to change and put the goalies having to wear masks.
Yep. Well, yeah, back in those days, sticks weren't curved, so shots were rarely off the ice. And most of the time when goaltenders happened to get hit in the face, number one, it was by accident. Players usually did a pretty good job at avoiding hitting goalies in the face. But number two, usually because the goalie was down on the ice, close to ice level. That's that's where they would get hit with the puck. So, yeah, injuries like this, 2 months is a long time to be missing a player for something that could easily have been prevented if they were wearing face shields. But you know what? It is what it is, I guess.
That's the way it goes.
The old school hockey guys are going to say, "Oh yeah, but then they're wimps and they're not tough and da 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 da." You know what? Yeah. Well, if you're an Anaheim Ducks fan, I bet you'd be on my side on this one. You're not going to have your captain and one of your best players for the next 2 months, and by then, if things don't go right, Anaheim could be out of a playoff spot. And they could miss the playoffs because of this.
You're right. That's absolutely right, Wayne.
So,
I agree with you about face protection. I know a guy on our team, Mark Stahl, who nearly lost his vision in an eye.
Yep.
Now wears a full face shield. So, you're preaching to the choir.
Yep.
Well,
at least they've got visors on nowadays. So, but they could do more. All right, Toronto Maple Leafs center Austin Matthews missed the game against Minnesota Wild on Wednesday with an upper body injury. He's day-to-day. It was the first time in Matthews' NHL career that he's missed a game. He played all 82 games last year and won the Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie after finishing with 69 points. Matthews leads the Maple Leafs in scoring this season with 19 points in 16 games. Matthews, who was the number 1 overall pick in 2016 NHL draft, played 21-11 and had an assist in Toronto's 4-3 shootout win against the Golden Knights on Monday, despite what Babcock called soreness. Matthews said then he had been dealing with a lingering injury, which he aggravated during a 6-4 loss at St. Louis on Saturday. He did not practice on Tuesday. So Matthews is missing his first time.
Yep.
Due to injury.
And that has a big effect on that team. It's like Connor McDavid going down for Edmonton.
Yep.
He's the heart and soul of that team. So, but only being day-to-day, Wayne, I think it's something where the team, the psyche of the team is not, they're probably calm about it. Well, he's going to be back. It's day-to-day. It's not going to be something where he's out 2 weeks or 3 weeks or an extended period of time. What are they going to do?
Yeah.
I don't.
If Austin Matthews were to ever get hurt long term, where he's going to be missing a month or more, they're going to have to install netting on all the bridges and buildings in Toronto because there'll be fans jumping off.
Poor Steve Dangle at that point,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and speaking of jumping off of bridges and buildings, Montreal Canadiens goaltender Carey Price has a lower body injury and didn't play against the Winnipeg Jets on Saturday. The Canadiens called the injury minor and said the decision to keep Price out on Saturday was a preventative measure. But at the same time, he hasn't played since. He is 3-7-1 with a 3.77 goals against average and 877 so far this season. And obviously he hasn't been himself. Montreal is also 3-0 without him in net, with Al Montoya and Charlie Lindgren filling the nets for them since Carey Price went down. So that's kind of an interesting side on that story.
Lindgren has been playing very well.
Yes, he has. Yeah, Lindgren has 2 of those 3 wins. And, what's going on with Carey Price? Again, they just signed him to a $10 million contract, $10 million per year contract extension, and all of a sudden he's hurt.
Yeah.
And can't play. So, yeah. If you own a tall building in Montreal and the Montreal government, you better start putting nets up because you're going to have people jumping off your buildings if they don't get Carey Price back soon. And even if Carey Price comes back, if he doesn't get back to playing the way Carey Price is supposed to play, yeah, you might as well.
You might as well dish out that $10 million.
Yeah.
Yep. Go write that check.
Oh, man. Yeah, that could turn out to be a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember Rick DiPietro?
Yeah.
With the Islanders? Signed that big, long, what was it, a 20-year contract or something? Ridiculous long because he was a number 1 overall pick goaltender. He was going to be the savior of the Islanders.
Yeah.
He didn't do squat once he got that contract signed.
Oh, yeah.
I hope they don't have another DiPietro on their hands there in Montreal. I don't want to put that thought in their heads. They might. Well, Montreal fans don't listen to us anyway. They all speak French, so.
Oh, man. We do get downloads up there in Quebec, but I don't know. Whatever. That's funny.
But yeah, Montreal has been playing well of late, so there is that.
Yep.
The guys that have been filling in.
they're definitely rising up through the ranks.
Yep. And I think with the numbers Price has been putting up, those numbers are ugly. They really are. I think he's been hurt all season, just wasn't telling anybody or.
And that could be.
Yeah.
And he's done that before too.
He has done that before, where he'll play hurt without saying anything. But if you play hurt, it becomes pretty obvious. I mean, the numbers don't lie. 3-7-1.
Yep.
Almost 4 goals a game. .877 save percentage. I mean, those were poor numbers by 1980 standards. Never mind today.
Yep.
So yeah, you can. It was clear something wasn't right with him. So it's probably good that they set him aside and let him get better. And as long as Montoya and Lindgren keep filling in a very nice fashion, that's all the more reason to keep Price on the sidelines and let him rest. All right. Forward Marcus Johansson has a concussion, was not in the lineup for the Devils against the Edmonton Oilers at Rogers Place on Friday. Johansson, who has 5 points in 10 games this season, was injured after falling headfirst into the end boards 57 seconds into the first period. A 2-0 win at the Vancouver Canucks on Wednesday. Devils coach John Hines provided no timetable on when Johansson could return after the skate on Friday. Johansson, who was acquired in a trade with the Capitals for 2 draft picks on July 2nd, set NHL career highs in goals with 24 and points with 58 and plus minus of plus 25 in 82 games for the Capitals last year. He had 8 points in 13 Stanley Cup playoff games last year. So yeah, Johansson is... wondering though with Johansson is if because he played on lines with Backstrom and Ovechkin, how much that was a part of his success, because 5 points in 10 games is not that great.
Right, that's true. That's very true. You might be onto something in terms of Johansson.
Yep. But Washington had to get rid of him because they were up against the cap, and he didn't have a choice. All right, next one. Brad Marchand is the latest banged up Bruin as he sat out Monday night's tilt with the Minnesota Wild with a lower body injury suffered against the Capitals over the weekend. He also missed Wednesday's game against the Rangers. Boston's top winger joins the list of 11 Bruins who have missed time with injury so far this season. So far this season, the Bruins have dealt with an inordinate amount of injuries to their core, with Noel Acciari, David Backes, Patrice Bergeron, Anton Hudobin, David Krejci, Torrey Krug, Adam McQuaid, Kevin Miller, Tuukka Rask, and Ryan Spooner all missing time at one point or another for various ailments. So yeah, we talked about that earlier.
We did.
Pretty frustrating as a Bruins fan, to say the least.
I feel your pain. I really do. It does have a very important aspect of in the team's performance. It does. It just does. Yeah.
And some of those guys are still out. Let's see: Acciari, Backes, Krejci, McQuaid, and Marchand are all out now. The rest of those guys we mentioned have all come. Well, Spooner's out too. He's not playing either. So yeah, that's what, 6, 7 players.
I watched Kevin Miller. Kevin Miller played last night.
Yeah, so Miller played last night. Krug played last night.
Krug played.
Yep. Hudobin didn't play, but he's on the bench. He's back. Tuukka's in net, of course. So yeah. All right. Other players put on IR this week, but I didn't pull any stories as to why and any details on them. Jared Bull for Anaheim, Nikolai Kulemin for the Islanders, Anders Nielsen for Vancouver, Josh Bailey for Buffalo, Matt Calvert in Columbus, David Krejci in Boston, Matt Nieto, Colorado, Anton Lindholm of Colorado, Brett Ritchie of Dallas, Nathan Beaulieu of Buffalo, Nicholas Hjalmarsson of Arizona, and Travis Hamonic of Calgary are all currently on the IR. And actually today, there were a couple that were added. Marcus Johansson for the Devils, of course, we talked about him, and Andre Casse for the Ducks are all on IR.
Mm-hmm.
Now, players, and I decided I was going to add this in because we really don't talk about players coming off IR and rejoining their teams. So I figured I'd just list them every week. Players that are coming back or have already come back for their respective teams. Justin Schultz of Pittsburgh, Jaromir Jagr of Calgary, Adam Lowry, Winnipeg, Gabriel Bourque of Colorado, Gabriel Carlson of Columbus, Kevin Bieksa of Anaheim, Roberto Luongo, Florida, Jared McCann, Florida, Justin Falk of Buffalo, not the defenseman. This is the forward, Justin Falk. Andy Ranta of Arizona, Brian Boyle of the Devils, and Lee Stempniak technically have been reactivated from IR with Carolina, and Kyle Palmieri from the Devils have all been reactivated from IR, so they have either already rejoined their team or will be shortly if they haven't already. All right, let's move on to suspensions and fines. Only had one this week that I could find.
Only had one.
Although
only had one.
One incident, we'll say. 3 players.
That's right.
New York Rangers.
To the player.
Yeah. New York Rangers forward Kevin Hayes, Tampa Bay Lightning forwards Alex Killorn and Steven Stamkos each have been fined $5,000, the maximum allowable under the collective bargaining agreement, for unsportsmanlike conduct during NHL game number 189 in Tampa on Thursday, November 2nd. The NHL's Department of Player Safety announced earlier in the week. The incident occurred at 3:01 of the third period. You watched that game. I didn't, so you tell us what happened.
Well, Kevin Hayes squirted water at Alex Killorn. But there was a lot of rough stuff going on. Killorn got away with in my opinion, an illegal hit prior to this happening. And it was obviously a move by Kevin Hayes to get under his skin. As soon as he did it, Killorn took his stick and kind of went right at Kevin Hayes and a couple of the New York Rangers players who were sitting at the bench, right on their necks. The officials saw that, did not see the water squirt, but saw them do that, and called a penalty on kind of out on the ice, which ended with Stamkos going over to the officials and saying, "Hey, you didn't see what happened," and he wouldn't let it go. I mean, he just kept on ranting and ranting and ranting about it. I mean, he was starting to remind me of Sidney Crosby. Anyways, he went over to the bench, grabbed a water bottle, and squirted it at the Rangers. And of course, there was nothing was called, and there was no. But it was just kind of it was just a moment where the Tampa Bay Lightning just, for lack of a better way of saying it, let the Rangers get under their skin.
Okay.
And they just got pissed about that. And I don't know. The way passion and stuff works on the ice. Yep. There's a team that's won 9 in a row with Vasilevsky, and they're playing at home. They don't want the Rangers to beat them. Plus the collective, you got Dan Girardi and Ryan Callahan, and you have players from the Rangers on that team. Anton Strawman. It's one of those things where they don't like losing. In fact, I would say that they are rapidly becoming more and more hated of each other on the ice. Really, they're not. It's not one of those games where you come in and there's really no beef with one another. The Rangers and the Lightning are developing a hatred for one another.
Imagine if they met in the playoffs. That would be fun.
Yeah. And I could see that happening.
Yep. Of course, $5,000 for Steven Stamkos is like you and me being fined a quarter. So.
Yeah, that's right. He walks into McDonald's with that and buys lunch for everybody.
Right. Not so much for Cloran Hayes, although, that's not a big deal for them.
No.
Either. But Stamkos, with the millions that he makes.
That's right.
But, yeah. And how does that work with fines anyway? They probably just get docked on their next check, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't actually have to write a check for $5,000. Their pay gets docked probably on their next check. That would be my guess. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. So, okay, well, interesting incident then.
Yeah.
So just boys being boys, in other words. All right.
I didn't say that, Wayne. You did.
All right. Some other interesting stories that we saw over the past week. The 2017 SAP NHL Global Series features games between the Colorado Avalanche and the Ottawa Senators on Friday and Saturday of this week at Ericsson Globe in Stockholm, Sweden. Both teams actually, I looked at the schedule for both teams. They went out there, I think both teams flew over on Tuesday, so they've been there most of the week. And both teams have 3 or 4 days off leading up to these two games and 3 or 4 days off after the two games. So both teams have very light schedules surrounding these, probably to accommodate for the jet lag that both teams are going to experience.
Right.
But by going there early, and I would that it's allowing both teams to take in the sites, and the NHL Network or NHL.com actually has a ton of stories surrounding these two games and the whole global series. I don't know what you think about NHL playing regular season games in Europe. I like the idea. I think it's good to bring the game to the global, fans, particularly in the hockey playing countries in the world. I don't know about China, but definitely the Swedens, the Finlands, let their fans take in the games because, after all, their best players are playing over here. So
right. Now it's going back several years, but the Rangers actually made that trip to Sweden, Stockholm.
Yep.
And played there. I do not remember who the team was they played against. Might have been the Flyers, but they've done that, and it is, Wayne, as you say, it showcases the talent of the NHL for fans who are very hockey knowledgeable and very in tune with what's going on globally.
Yep.
Particularly countries like Sweden, Finland, Russia, even Germany.
Yep.
They know about the hockey that goes on in the NHL, how it's played, and et cetera, et cetera. So,
and I know the NHL has looked at the possibility. I know they haven't really done anything for real on it. At the possibility of possibly having a European division from over there.
Right.
But they've pretty much thrown that out because of the travel challenges that they would have to face. Particularly a team from like Europe who would have to travel to the West Coast of the United States. You're talking 10, 12-hour difference, in time.
On a plane.
It'd be a lot easier if the NHL was only on the East Coast of the U.S., all in the Eastern time zone, playing games over in Europe. That is actually feasible, but it's that L.A. to Stockholm would be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
If the NHL were to expand, and this is completely hypothetical, but if the NHL were to expand to Europe, I think the only way they could pull it off would be to do something what the AHL does. You have the two different conferences, and the teams don't play each other at all in the other conference throughout the season. They would only meet if they happen to meet in the playoffs. Kind of like the AHL does now. Western Conference plays amongst themselves. Eastern Conference plays amongst themselves. Those teams don't play each other at all during the regular season. And then they would only meet if they happen to meet in the final.
Right.
I think that's the only way that you could realistically have an NHL that has teams based in Europe. Would be, you'd have to have the Eastern Conference would be considered, teams. You'd have to have a division of teams over in Europe, and then a division probably of Northeast teams, because even traveling from Florida up to Sweden would be a bit of a haul, but from Boston or Montreal to Sweden is actually not a bad flight.
Right.
Not much worse than, Boston to L.A. or
To
Boston
Anaheim.
yeah. So you would have to have an NHL where the East and West don't play each other at all until they meet in the final. That's the only way I could see it happening, but never know. It could happen.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the NHL's always looking to expand. There's been speculation out there that the NHL's looking to get to as many as 40 teams, although it would take quite a few years to get that big. But
oh, yeah. I think the league would be too raggedy if
we say that, though. And we said that back in the early 90s when they expanded from 21 up to 24. We said, the league is getting diluted. But now, because of modern technology and communication and the science that has been brought into the game, the players, particularly, the last 5 or so years, the draft classes that have come out, the players are just so good now.
Right.
If you took a 4th round or even a 7th round draft pick player today, put them up against a 1st round draft pick of 25 years ago, they'd skate circles around them.
Right.
That's how much better the hockey is now, the players are now.
Right.
Because they've learned from, it's just like everything else in life. You take what others have learned, you take the next step. So we say that the league would be watered down, but if they took the expansion slowly, they could eventually get to, say a 40-team league, and it wouldn't feel like it's watered down.
Mm. That scares me. Strange things have happened, but
yep. Because we're at 31 now, and the teams are all pretty even, and almost every game is entertaining. So
right.
So who's to say we can't expand further? And I know I expect within the next 2 years the NHL will announce a 32nd team for sure. They're not going to want to stay at 31 forever. They want to at the very least get to that even 32 where there's 8 or 16 in each conference.
Right.
To even things up. All right. Next story I have, as much as we were kind of giving Montreal fans the business a couple stories ago, this story Montreal fans are going to love because pretty much it centers around them. The NHL and Montreal Canadiens are going to host a series of events and ceremonies on November 17th through the 19th to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the league. The celebration will take place in Montreal, where the NHL was founded, at the Windsor Hotel in November 1917. Representing the original 6 roots of the NHL, Hall of Famers Ray Bourque, representing the Bruins, Yvan Cournoyer of the Canadiens, Rod Gilbert of the Rangers, Dave Keon from Toronto, Frank Mahovlich from Detroit, and Dennis Savard representing Chicago Blackhawks, who have won a combined 22 Stanley Cup champions, scored 2,934 goals, and produced 7,625 points. And we're talking about those players I just named there. In 8,156 regular season and playoff games, will all make special appearances throughout the weekend. The activities will launch with a general managers meeting at the historic Windsor, where, according to handwritten minutes taken 100 years ago, a meeting was called to ascertain if some steps could not be taken to perpetuate the game of hockey. And the NHL league officially became into being on November 26th of 1917. The league will honor that moment on November 17th, 2017, with a gathering of top hockey operations executives representing the league and its 31 franchises. Following the meeting, the NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, the NHL General Managers, Hall of Famers, and representatives from the Government of Canada will dedicate a plaque recognizing the historic site as the birthplace of the league. The plaque will honor a century of NHL memories, moments and milestones. Later Friday, Commissioner Bettman will join Montreal Canadiens owner, president, and CEO Jeff Molson, the general managers and Hall of Famers at the Chamber of Commerce of Metropolitan Montreal Business Luncheon at the Hotels Bonaventure. The event, a salute to 100 years of the NHL, will include unique programming featuring league and club executives. On Saturday night, the Toronto Maple Leafs will face off against the Montreal Canadiens at the Bell Centre, following a ceremonial puck drop featuring legendary Hall of Famers, including Keon and Corneille, rivals from Maple Leafs and the Canadiens, respectively, during the 60s and 70s. The weekend will be accentuated by the presence of the NHL Centennial Fan Arena, which we both got to visit.
That's right.
A touring tribute to a century of NHL hockey. The free interactive experience, located just outside Bell Center on Saturday and Sunday, features an innovative music. It goes on about that. Saturday will also include special appearances and Q&A sessions with Hall of Famers. Fans also will have the opportunity to have their photos taken with the Stanley Cup. Man, a note on that. Can you imagine trying to get your picture taken in the Stanley Cup in Montreal?
Yeah.
Talk about lines.
Oh. You get it. You better get it right the first time you get up there, because you won't be getting back in line and waiting again for a second time.
Yeah, no, not unless you want to wait hours. So, and of course, they had to note there that the trophy was earned by the Canadiens 24 times more than any other Stanley Cup franchise. There should be an asterisk next to that. Free fan activities will also include the first ever public display of the 100 greatest player portraits. All player portraits have been painted by renowned Canadian artist Tony Harris. Based in Ottawa, Ontario, Harris was specifically commissioned to create the 100 original portraits. And then it talks about more about his work. So yeah, just basically, I think this is just a culmination, one final big celebration that has been going on pretty much for the past year.
Right.
Of the 100-year celebration of the league, and it's all pretty much coming to an end with this one big ceremony here in Montreal, one big weekend in Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
So Montreal fans will be at the very center of all of this stuff.
Yep.
And I think after this weekend, or after this celebration, you're going to see the end of the whole 100-year anniversary thing. I wonder what they're going to do with the trucks. They've been all over the country.
Yeah.
They'll probably repaint them and come up with some other use for them, I'm sure. All right, next story. Tyler Seguin finally beat Mark Scheifele at rock, paper, scissors. Kind of. The Dallas Stars forward and Winnipeg Jets forward have a standing game of rock, paper, scissors that takes place at the end of warm-ups whenever their teams play. They have played twice before. Twice, Scheifele has won. Before Monday's game, Seguin sort of won. Video of the matchup showed Scheifele clearly threw out scissors, but Seguin, he kind of threw a rock-paper hybrid with wiggling, rounded fingers. Scheifele walked off in disbelief. A laugh and Seguin followed, knowing that he protected home ice. Let's hope this is a best-of-7 series. Mike Scheifele got the last laugh, though, as he scored 2 goals in the game, and the Jets won the game 4-1. And I don't know if you knew the reason behind this match of rock, paper, scissors.
No, I don't.
Okay, well, you know how hockey players have silly superstitions, right? Well, both of these guys have a superstition that they have to be the last guy off the ice at the end of warm-ups. Well, when you got 2 players that both want to be the last, the first time they did it, they both tried to trick each other. Like, one made a move to go to the ice, and then at the last second curled away, and tricking. They both try to be the last guy off the ice, right? Because that's their personal superstition. Well, finally they decided that they're going to settle whenever they meet. They're going to settle this with rock, paper, scissors. And of course, Scheifele won the first 2 times, and this time Seguin wins. So now every time these 2 teams play each other, you're going to see You're going to see these guys doing rock, paper, scissors at the end of each warm-up. So, yeah, so that's the whole reason behind it, is both guys want to be the last guy off the ice at warm-up, and there it is. All right. Next story I have is actually kind of not so good news. Kerry Frazier, who retired in 2010 after spending 30 years as an NHL referee, that's a long time, was recently diagnosed with a rare chronic blood disorder called essential thrombocythemia. I think I got that right.
Yeah.
As part of Hockey Fights Cancer Month, Frazier wrote a long article sharing his diagnosis and his outlook with NHL.com, and I included a link to the article in show notes, basically talking about his story of how he found out he had it and what he's doing going forward. So it's kind of sad to see, because Kerry Frazier, in my opinion, was probably one of the better officials to ever wear the stripes. And of course, he was known for his legendary hair. I don't know if you remember that.
No.
He was one of the last referees to skate without wearing a helmet. And I think he may have been the last. But he was known because his hair, he had the great hair, the Kerry Frazier hair. It's legendary around the league for having that hair. Skating around the ice as fast as they do, and that hair never moved. He had it so... every last hair was in perfect place all the time. Never out of place. So that's what he's best known for. But he was a great official as well. To spend 30 years in the NHL, he did many, many Stanley Cup finals. One of the best all time.
Wow.
So hopefully he'll beat it. Although they say it's incurable, but it is manageable if everything takes in terms of his medicine. So we're hoping for the best for Kerry Frazier, for sure.
Very good.
All right, we had a retirement this week.
Yeah, I saw this and I couldn't believe it.
Yep. Vadim Shipachyov has ended his long and storied NHL career. Vegas Golden Knights general manager George McPhee said on Thursday that Shipachyov has retired from the NHL. Shipachyov, who's 30, signed a 2-year, $9 million contract with Vegas on May 4th and is now eligible to play once again in the Continental Hockey League. The Golden Knights will recoup the prorated amount of his $2 million signing bonus. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, McPhee said, and you have to know that going in. He said there was a trade in place for Shipachyov, but he didn't want to be moved to another NHL team. Probably was to a weak team. Mm-hmm. He didn't say who it was. Of course, we'll never find out.
Yeah.
We gave them permission to seek another deal in the NHL if they wanted to. McPhee said, we found a deal in the NHL he didn't want to play. He wanted to go home. Shipachyov did not make the Golden Knights opening night roster and didn't make his NHL debut until their 5th game of the season, October 15th, a 3-1 win against the Boston Bruins when he scored a goal. It was his only goal in 3 games with Vegas, and he was suspended on October 29th after failing to report to Chicago, the American Hockey League. He needed to play, McPhee said. Everyone here was playing better than he was. He needed to play, and we were willing to have him play in Chicago. He just wanted to go home, and we accommodated him, and we wish him well, McPhee said. He's a good player, a good guy, and it just didn't work out for us and for him here. So I can't. I don't know what to say here, but
yeah, it's not a language barrier thing that much.
I don't want to say I called it, but
you did call it. You called it. You said it, Wayne.
I said early on in the preseason he didn't look that sharp in the preseason, and everyone was flaming me and saying, "Oh, well, it's preseason. Relax." Nobody's expected to play that well in preseason. Well, he never really did look that good. And, even the goal that he scored, of course, it was against the Bruins, so I watched that game. The goal that he scored, it was just an opportunistic bounce. He was in front of the net. The puck came right out onto his stick. I could have scored that goal. So Not that, to say that he will, I'm a better player than he is. I'm not saying that by any means, but it certainly wasn't the kind of goal that would make you say, wow, look at that. It was just a garbage goal in front of the net as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, Shipachyov, just, for whatever reason didn't work out. We've talked ad nauseum about the language barriers and all that.
Yep.
Obviously he didn't like it here. Decided to go home. He'll be back in the KHL. Whatever team he signs with there, we'll be happy to have him back, and we'll be once again talking about him leading the league in goals. Probably won't happen this year, but for the rest of this year anyway, he'll be, and we'll probably be talking about him in the Olympics, playing for Team Russia.
I wouldn't be surprised. He'll go back to where he's comfortable, and just blend right in.
Yep.
Life goes on.
Life goes on. For both sides.
That's right.
So, all right. Well, we had our weekly players of the week announced this week. Chicago Blackhawks goaltender Corey Crawford, New York Islanders right wing Josh Bailey, and San Jose Sharks goaltender Martin Jones have all been named the NHL's 3 stars for the week ending November 5th. Crawford went 2-1. With a 0.68 goals against average, .979 save percentage, and 2 shutouts to lead the Blackhawks to a pair of wins. Bailey collected a league-leading 7 assists in 3 games to guide the Islanders to a 2-1 week. Jones picked up 3 wins in 3 starts, compiling a 1.3 goals against average and .938 save percentage to backstop the Sharks to a perfect week. All right. Let's move on to our power rankings.
Yes, sir.
And I believe it's my turn this week.
It is your turn this week, Wayne.
All right. I tried to I looked things over, and let's see if we got any surprises this week. At number 16, I have Chicago. And I almost debated taking them out of the top 16, but I have them in at 16 because they just haven't been playing that well. San Jose, I've got at 15. Ottawa at 14. Number 13, I have the Rangers.
Wow.
It's a big jump, huh?
That's a big jump.
5 in a row,
5 in a row is good.
And a win over Tampa Bay, that's to me makes it worth a big jump. Number 12, I've got Pittsburgh. Number 11, I've got Toronto. Number 10, I've got the Islanders, who've been playing very well. Number 9, Nashville. Number 8, Vancouver. Number 7, Columbus. Number 6, although I'm still expecting a drop, is Vegas.
Yep.
They're still doing fairly well. Number 5, New Jersey. Number 4, Winnipeg. Number 3, St. Louis. Number 2, Tampa Bay. And number 1, I've got L.A. Just because of how well they've been playing.
They have been playing very, very well. Of course, so is Tampa Bay, though.
Now, I will say those top 3, to me, are almost interchangeable. L.A., Tampa Bay, St. Louis. All 3 of those teams, I think, are playing. There's a gap between those 3 and everybody else.
Right. I agree.
Now.
Yep.
So
I agree.
So I would almost, and in fact, I mulled over that. I was looking at that. I'm like, L.A., Tampa Bay, St. Louis. It took me a while to figure out who I was going to put 1, 2, and 3 in that, because to me right now, all 3 teams, if it's flip a coin for me.
They're all playing well.
Yeah. They're all playing extremely well. So I put LA at number 1 just for total body of work, for looking at not just over the past week or 2, but the total season. They've been firing all cylinders from day 1. So, and then a couple of notables. I've got Boston at 22, which is pretty much the same place they were last week. And I've got Carolina at 24, which is pretty much the same as where they were last week.
Right.
But I do have Montreal climbing. They're up to 26 from 30. And Edmonton, although they are playing better, I don't have them climbing just yet. Giving them one more week down in the depths of the. I've got them at 29.
Yeah.
All right,
They're almost in the no return zone there.
Well, it's possible for them to come back. I'd be curious to see what they do with the game tonight with New Jersey. So.
Yeah, that's going to be a good game.
Yep. All right, let's look ahead. Speaking of looking ahead at some of the games that we got coming up this week. I'll let you start with the Rangers because they got a very light week this week. Extremely light.
We play Saturday at the Garden once again against Edmonton. That'll be a matinee game, and do not miss that game. If you have a chance to tune in, you have Center Ice or NHL.tv. Tune in that game. Watch that one for sure. As Connor McDavid comes to Madison Square Garden, that ought to be that'll be a hell of a game.
Should be a fun game to watch.
Rangers riding a 5-game winning streak. Also, Cam Talbot, and we haven't talked about Cam Talbot and his performance as the goalie for Edmonton. Perhaps what is he 5-8-1 or something? He's not started out very well for them.
No.
And that could be part of the reason why Edmonton is kind of fizzled.
It's part of it, but not all of it. I think, and I watch quite a few Edmonton games, not start to finish, but just my impressions of what I've seen from Edmonton. Cam Talbot is not playing as well as he was last year.
Right.
Although he's not playing horrible. He's having his moments.
Right.
Another part of the problem with Edmonton is they're not showing that team speed that they had last year overall.
Right.
So they're a slower team. They're not showing the explosiveness that they had last year. Right. That's another part of it. And their defensemen are not playing as well as they had been in the past. So there's a lot of little issues going on with Edmonton, but it's not unsalvageable. They can definitely come out of it if they have to.
Right. I hear you.
And they certainly have to because there's high expectations on that team this year.
The only other game, Wayne, with the Rangers, they're playing a second consecutive Wednesday night rivalry against Chicago in the United Center next Wednesday night. So that'll close out a 2-game week. They really need it, in my opinion. They played a lot of games, and fatigue can set in. So. Yeah. For them to get a few days off here and then in between the Chicago game is probably welcome relief for a lot of those players.
There's only 2 games, but man, they're good ones. Edmonton and Chicago.
Yep.
They're both must-watches if you're a Ranger fan. All right. Let's see. Carolina's got 3 games this week. They're at Columbus on the 10th. And then they're at home against Chicago on the 11th, so it's a back-to-back there. And then they're at home against Dallas on the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
3 tough opponents again this week for Carolina. They're getting a lot of their hard opponents out of the way the early part of the season.
That's true.
But
difficult games.
Yep, but good test for Carolina. I mean, They've got to learn to beat those teams if they want to consider themselves among those teams.
That's true.
So, good test for them. I don't think you're going to get much out of them, although I went to – you weren't with me that night. I went to a Chicago-Carolina game in recent years, and I expected Chicago to walk all over Carolina, and Carolina ended up with a 5-0 win that night. So,
wow.
Stranger things have happened.
Yep. When you talk about hockey, anything can happen. That's for sure.
That's true.
For the strangest of reasons.
Yep. Yeah, nobody was expecting because Chicago was playing on all cylinders at that point in time, and Carolina was really struggling. And Carolina came out, and it's like Chicago just didn't bother to show up for the game. I mean, they had all their guys too. Kane played, Taves played, Corey Crawford was in net. I mean, you name it, they had all their guns. Duncan Keith, they were all there.
Wow.
But they just completely laid an egg. Carolina won that game 5-0. So stranger things have happened, but I think, though, Carolina's got to find a way to get 4 points out of these 3 games at minimum.
Yep.
If
they're going to have to start each week. They got 4 games. They're going to have to get 6 points. 3 games, they got to get 4 points. That's how it's starting to get for them.
Yep. Yeah, even if it's 1 win and 2 overtime losses, they got to find a way to get 4 points out of these 3 games. That's how they're going to climb back in, is just chipping away. And Boston, the same thing for them. They've got to do the same thing. This week, they've got a home-and-home against Toronto, which isn't going to be easy. And then they've got the first game in their California road trip, which that road trip scares the bejesus out of me every year.
Yeah.
That West Coast, California, Anaheim, San Jose, LA road swing. All three of those teams out there are playing very well right now, although Anaheim is struggling probably more than the other two due to the injury issues that they've got. But, again, if looking way ahead, they're at Anaheim on the 15th, but then they play, they're doing that the West Coast swing. So we'll into the following week. So that there is, and then they've got the two games against Toronto leading into that. So it's going to be a tough, probably 5 to 6 games for the Bruins here in the next week to week and a half. So they've got to find a way to get some points until they get their players back. All right. As far as notable games going on over the past week, of course, we're already into, today is Thursday the 9th. And there's a number of games tonight. So by the time this podcast hits your inbox, these games will be all over. So we'll move on to the next night. Tomorrow night, you've got Penguins Capitals. That's always a fun game to watch. Jets and Golden Knights, although normally we wouldn't talk about them as being a big game, but both teams are playing very well. So that's a good test for both teams. And, of course, you got your two Sweden games, and those are actually taking place in the middle of the afternoon, our time, 2 p.m. Fridays. If you happen to have Friday off, I don't. I'll be at work, but if you happen to have Friday off, you got a 2 o'clock game on Friday afternoon to watch.
A matinee.
Yep, Senators out. I mean, it's nighttime for them because they're over there in Sweden, but for us, it'll be a matinee game. And then, of course, Saturday they play each other again at 1 p.m. Eastern. But there's generally other games on Saturday in the NHL that are in the afternoon. In fact, the Rangers play the Oilers at 1 o'clock that day.
That's right. That's a matinee.
Yep. And then, of course, Sabres Canadiens. That's a division rivalry game. Those are always fun to watch. Penguins Predators, rematch of last year's Stanley Cup final. That one is at Nashville. That one's taking place Saturday. Canucks and Sharks, if you want to stay up late. Two teams that are playing very well out west. On Sunday, you've got the Oilers and Capitals. Lightning and Ducks are playing on Sunday. Sharks and Kings. Those California games are always fun to watch if you want to stay up late. I'll probably watch that one after I get out of I'm reffing that night, so I'll get home right about the middle of the first period of that game, so I'll probably be up watching that game because it takes me a while to wind down from reffing. And then on Monday the 13th, there's just 2 games, Stars Hurricanes and Blues Flames. Tuesday the 14th, we've got Capitals Predators. What should have been last year's Stanley Cup final by all accounts, because the Capitals were supposed to roll over everybody. Canadiens Blue Jackets are also playing that night. Golden Knights and Oilers. I don't know, for some reason that one intrigues me a little bit. And then on Wednesday night next week, you got the rivalry game, Rangers Blackhawks.
Right.
Bruins will be at the Ducks that night. And then next Thursday, which is be the night of our next podcast, Stars Lightning should be a good one. Predators Wild. Penguins Senators, that'll be their first game back home after the swing out to Sweden. Blues Oilers, as well as the Blues are playing, the Oilers need that win. And then, of course, after playing the Anaheim Ducks, the Bruins play the next night against the Kings. So I'll be up late that week watching those games. So, interesting week coming up.
Yes, it is. Don't stay up too late, Wayne, like I did last night. We'll be chasing the cobwebs all day.
Well, see, I don't generally a lot of days lately. I don't have to be into work until 10 at the earliest and 1 o'clock at the latest. So I can sleep in a little bit after staying up till 1 a.m. You don't have that luxury.
I don't have that luxury.
No,
I'm up at the crack of dawn.
Yep.
But
all right, let's look ahead to our minor league minute, and I will let you go first because I've got one that's kind of interesting.
Okay.
Not that yours isn't, but
no, this is, and I scratched and clawed. I've written a lot of these hockey minutes on the KHL, but I've really been trying to study the AHL and learn more about it in tune with our hockey game that we went and watched now coming up on 2 weeks ago. But I did see an interesting article on the AHL.com website entitled Montreal Canadiens Like Having Rocket Close at Hand. And I think you're finding this with a lot of these NHL teams wanting to have their farm team franchise close to where they are. Easy to call players up, reduces the cost on the team for a number of different things.
I saw this article, yeah.
And it was really interesting. It goes this way. There are 18 subway stops between the Montreal Canadiens home rink and that of the team's new American Hockey League affiliate, the Laval Rocket. Not that players are big users of public transit, but having their top farm club close at hand appears to be popular with the Canadiens brass, their top farmhands, and the fans. The nice thing is there are always a lot of upper management at every game, so you have the chance to prove yourself and open some eyes so that hopefully when they need to call on someone, you are that guy, Rocket defenseman Matt Terramina said Friday. After 2 seasons at the St. John's Ice Caps in Newfoundland and Labrador, the Canadiens moved their AHL team into the new 10,000-seat Place Belle in Laval, one of Montreal's closest suburbs, and renamed it the Rocket. It follows a recent trend among NHL clubs to keep their top farm club nearby, making it easier to call players up or send them down, and for management to track their progress. The Toronto Maple Leafs, Winnipeg Jets, and San Jose Sharks are among other teams to have their AHL affiliate in the same city. Attendance averaged 6,481 through Laval's first 6 games, although after a sellout for the inaugural game on October 6th, it looks to be settling in at just under 6,000, which is above average for the AHL.
That's not bad.
No, that's not bad at all. And I think about 6,000 the other night at the Charlotte Coliseum would have really filled that place up pretty good, which they seat about close to 10,000 there, don't they, Wayne?
Yeah, it's just over 10,000 at that rink.
And I say the Charlotte Coliseum, it's the Bojangles Coliseum.
Yeah.
Anyways, the Canadiens had their affiliate Hamilton until 2015, when they moved to St. John's while waiting on Place Belle to be completed. Forward Chris Terry, who played in St. John's last season, liked both cities. The fans are great here, and they were great in St. John's, Terry said. Obviously, the distance compared to the big club is a big thing. It's a 30-minute drive as opposed to a 3-hour flight. But from a hockey standpoint, we are still playing hockey. It's just a new venue, new fans, and a new experience. Rocket coach Sylvain Lefebvre had coached the squad since 2012 in Hamilton. They missed the playoffs 4 straight years before finally getting in last season when they were ousted in the first round. To ensure the club succeeds in Laval, they loaded up on veterans. We have a lot of depth this year. Older guys with a lot of valuable experience, said Terry. And even the guys who are second or third year have 1 more year of experience. Last year we had a great team. We got into the playoffs with a good run, and gave Syracuse everything they had. And by the way, the Syracuse Crunch finished in that they made it all the way to the AHL, the Calder Cup finals, but they lost the finals to I believe it was the Grand Rapids Griffins won it last year. Back to the story. On Friday, they finally named their first captain, veteran center Brian Froese. Terry and Taormina were picked as alternate captains in voting among the players. All three have some NHL and extensive AHL experience. Currently, Laval is in second place in the North Division with 16 points, 2 points behind the Toronto Marlies, who are in first. So that's where they stand currently. But I thought that was an interesting article to open up some eyes, I guess, to our listeners as to what's going on in the AHL. And of course, it immediately got me asking questions. St. Louis does not have an AHL farm affiliate right now. And you got to wonder, where would they put a team? Kansas City, perhaps? They could even put a minor league team right there, close to, if not in St. Louis.
Yeah, like the article says, the trend lately with the AHL is to try to put NHL teams are trying to put their farm teams close to the parent club. So for obvious reasons, it makes sense. I mean, I wondered as a kid, why do this NHL team have their farm team across the country when there's constantly players going to and from, particularly this day and age with as many players getting hurt, injured day to day. In the salary cap era, you can't be carrying, all these extra players.
Right.
So yeah, having your farm team close is definitely a must, and the Bruins have basically always done that with their farm team. They had obviously the Providence Bruins, which is maybe a 90-minute drive from Boston, and before that they had the Maine Mariners.
That's right.
Who are really only a 2-hour drive from Boston, so it's advantageous to have your farm team that close because it allows that movement to and from a lot easier.
That's right.
And the example here, of course, is Charlotte Checkers being the farm team for the Carolina Hurricanes. It's about a 2.5 hour drive between the two arenas. So.
You don't see a lot of the Utica Comets, Vancouver Canucks out there.
No, that one is still got quite a few miles.
Yeah, that does.
And I'm sure Vancouver would like to do something about that, but because there's also a country border in between there, which slows things down even more. So
that's right. That's right.
So yeah, interesting story out of the AHL. And I have one out of the AHL. And actually, before I go into it, I need to give out props to Chris Vigors, one of our Twitter followers. He's the one that brought this story to my attention, and it was very interesting story indeed. He's one of our listeners, one of our followers. He brought us the story, and we thank him for the story that we're going to use here. But would you believe there is actually a goalie that is playing professional hockey that is allergic to ice? This is not an exaggeration. Chris Truel is a junior hockey goalie for the NCAA Quinnipiac Bobcats. He's also, this was actually written back in February 2017. He's actually playing over in the EIHL, the British Elite Hockey League now. But at the time this article was written, he was playing for Quinnipiac. Greg Wyshynski, guy who we know from his podcast. He does a podcast as well. He's a hockey writer. He wrote the article back in February. But anyway, Chris Truel is a junior hockey goalie for the NCAA Quinnipiac Bobcats. He's now playing over in Britain in the EIHL. He's also that person who's allergic to cats but becomes a veterinarian, or that person who's allergic to nuts who works on the assembly line for Skippy. Truel is an ice hockey player who's allergic to ice. ice and significantly cold temperatures, which would, in theory, make playing hockey a rather arduous task. I know there's absolutely no shortage of irony there, he told Quinnipiac Now. Truhl has cold urticaria, which are hives that develop from exposure to the cold. It first showed up in 2013 when he was playing hockey with the U.S. Air Force, red welts on his skin growing intensely more painful. His coaches thought it could have been from an insect bite. It turned out it was due to the very surface he was playing on. Unfortunately, the condition spelled the end of his military career. He eventually ended up at Quinnipiac, where he's been on a goalie rotation with Andrew Shortridge. His condition can be muted with proper attention. Truhl will change his thermal undershirts during the game. He's constantly stretching during the game, as inactivity can trigger the skin the malady. Perhaps the biggest change from the typical goalie routine, no post-game ice baths, as he used heating pads instead.
God.
According to Inverse, a science site, there's a lot of doctors who don't know about cold urticaria. Truhl has aspirations to play professionally. He's been in 21 games this season with a 2.66 goals against average and an .899 save percentage. Considering his body is at constant war with the surface he's playing on, that's a remarkable effort. So in the article talks about that he attributed his condition to events that occurred prior to his time at Quinnipiac. As part of his Air Force training, he had to complete survival exercises with 4 of his peers in the woods of Colorado. It was June. They were prepared for dry 90-degree heat. An unexpected weather system, however, blindsided Truhl and his team. For 5 days, they plodded through the rain and hail, the temperature dipping at times below 40 degrees. By the end of the exercise, frostbite covered nearly 40% of Truhl's skin.
Wow.
The U.S. Air Force physician who treated him told Truhl that while he would recover, he might experience certain side effects as a result of his exposure. Whether or not the condition, which can be treated with antihistamines, is hereditary or has an unidentified cause, is apparent in how it affects the body. People who have familial cold urticaria who are exposed to cold typically take 24 to 48 hours to show their symptoms. People who have the acquired form, however, erupt into hives within 2 to 5 minutes after exposure.
God.
It's estimated that 1% of Americans are affected by this cold allergy as a whole, but there could be more. Many people appear to mistake their condition as a result of a food allergy. So, what
absolutely amazing.
What a weird ailment to have.
That is
for someone who plays hockey.
Really a tremendously good minor hockey league. I was really trying to picture myself being allergic to ice if I was going to, do anything as far as practice or anything as a hockey player. That's hard to think of. That it's hard to put in my mind.
What I wonder, it's easy to cover his skin with all his goalie gear, and obviously he has to stay warm. So if he plays in a particularly cold rink, now I don't know. I know the British Elite Hockey League is actually an up and coming league. That league keeps getting better and better every year because more and more players are being drawn to it from outside Great Britain in particular. I don't know how cold the buildings are there, but obviously he has to stay warm. But the one thing that jumped out on me that could be an issue is, a player coming in on net, let's say he's chasing a puck. You see it all the time. Player has to come to a complete stop right there at the crease.
Right.
And the goalie gets sprayed with snow.
Mm-hmm.
How does he deal with that?
To me, that would be an instant cropping up of those lesions that you're talking about on his skin.
And whether or not he would get those, whether or not he gets those on his face is because the face is the one thing that's exposed in this scenario.
Right.
So just interesting.
Very, very interesting.
Interesting story. And we wish the kid good luck, of course. He's playing over in the British Elite League over there. And I'm sure he would eventually like to someday work his way up to at least play pro over here in the ECHL or even the NHL or the AHL. And he's a long shot to be an NHLer, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. So.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's head on to our College Hockey Minute. And last week, Maine split with UMass Lowell at UMass Lowell. Lost 3-2 on Friday night, won 6-2 on Saturday night. And this weekend, they're off. And to me, it almost looks like it's just a flat-out hole in their schedule that they were unable to fill. Because they don't have any games this weekend. They don't play again until next weekend when they play BU next weekend. So that's a tough match.
Where is that, in BU?
It's actually both. They're considered home games for Maine. But one game is in Orono at their home rink, and then the other game is in Portland, Maine at the arena where the old Portland Pirates used to play.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
And Maine does do that every year. They like to play one or two games down in Portland, and it allows the fans of Maine hockey, because Portland's a 2.5-hour drive from the campus.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people can't make it up regularly to a University of Maine game just because 2.5-hour drive each way is be like you and I commuting to go to Charlotte every night for a game. It's just not feasible to do on a regular basis. So Maine does like to play a couple of games a year down in Portland, just to allow the fans down there to get them to see in person without having to make the drive. So, and that's one of those games. All right, looking at the rest of the country, there were a ton of upsets over the past week, and I'll just go down through them real quick here. Unranked Army West Point upset number 19 Air Force 3-2 on Friday night. Of course, these are all games from Friday night. That had to have been a great game. Two armed forces games.
Oh, yeah.
Army against Air Force. Even though you don't typically think of them as being, powerhouse teams in college hockey, but when they play each other, those games have got to be fun to watch. Especially when you get the student bodies involved in the stands. Also Friday night, Yale, who's unranked, beat Harvard in our Ivy League game that we talked about last week. That was a 5-2 game. That was at Harvard. Number 18, Cornell, upset number 11, Quinnipiac 2-1. Number 6, Providence, lost to number 12, BU 2-0. Although BU has been ranked higher than 12 earlier this season. Number 1, Denver, lost to unranked Western Michigan 6-5 on Friday night. Bowling Green beat number 20, Michigan Tech. Bowling Green's unranked. That was a 2-1 game. Unranked Mercyhurst beat number 17, Penn State 7-4. On Saturday night, Army West Point beat Air Force 2-0 again. And Air Force, again, number 19. Colgate beat Quinnipiac 4-1. Quinnipiac's the number 11 ranked team. Colgate it being unranked. Number 15, Northeastern, upset number 12, BU 4-1. And that was at BU. Number 1, Denver, lost again to Western Michigan on Saturday night, 7-4. So I'm sure Denver will be out of that number 1 spot this week with those two losses. Number 9, Minnesota State, lost to unranked Northern Michigan 4-1. So, yeah, a lot of upsets last week.
A lot of upsets.
Looking ahead to this week, number 19, Penn State, plays number 6, Notre Dame, twice at Notre Dame. Number 15, Boston University, plays number 13, Northeastern on Friday night. And St. Cloud State will play Denver, and I'm not going to tell you the rankings of those two teams because that will spoil my rankings. They play 2 games this week, and I'm going to call them our games of the week because both teams are ranked in the top 5, so we'll leave it at that. Number 18, Western Michigan at number 12, Minnesota Duluth for 2 games. Number 5, Harvard plays number 14, Cornell, another Ivy League update or another Ivy League game, and of course both teams are ranked, so that should be a good one. And then number 9, New Hampshire plays number 15, Boston University on Saturday night. All right, to the rankings. Number 10 this week, Minnesota State, who's 6-3. Number 9, New Hampshire, who's 6-1-1. Number 8, Providence, who's 5-3. Number 7, Wisconsin, who's 6-4-1. Number 6, Notre Dame, who's 6-3-1. Number 5 is Harvard this week, who's 2-1 so far this season. Number 4, Minnesota at 7-3. Number 3 this week is Denver, who's dropped from the number 1 spot. They're at 4-2-2 now. Number 2 this week is North Dakota, who's 6-2-2. And your new number 1 this week with 50 first-place votes, which is unanimous for this poll, St. Cloud State. They are 7-0-0.
Undefeated.
Undefeated.
Or you could do it like Michael Buffer. You could say, undisputed, undefeated. You could go on and on about it.
Yep. Well, they're firing on all cylinders. They haven't lost a game yet, so they deserve. They're the only team. Actually, no, they're not. Cornell is 4-0, but their season is young, and they haven't really played anybody yet. So their games against Harvard this week will be will tell where Cornell's going to be a good test for Cornell. But they're 4-0. St. Cloud is 7-0. Everybody else has at least one loss. So, all right, that leaves us our picks of the week.
Picks of the week for the week, Wayne.
And I'll let you start.
I'm gonna start because I think yours is gonna close out the show better than mine will. Mine is actually, I don't know, a pseudo prank. Is it the truth? Is it a prank? It's probably a mixture of both. But when I saw this, I couldn't help but chuckle. I really laughed pretty good at this, Wayne. I thought of you. When I saw the picture, it was really something. My pick of the week this week is in regards to Ryan Reeves of the Pittsburgh Penguins, used to play for the St. Louis Blues. Reeves honors Phil Kessel with an incredible T-shirt during a post-game interview. Penguins forward celebrates teammate and friend after hours segment. And I guess that's a show that comes on Sportsnet at the end of games that they broadcast. They will have an announcer sit down, it's called After Hours, and talk with different players of the team, of the winning or losing team. Ryan Reeves wore a thrilling shirt for his post-game interview with Sportsnet on Saturday. Reeves paid homage to his friend and Pittsburgh Penguins teammate Phil Kessel by wearing an incredible T-shirt with Kessel's face over Michael Jackson's body, mimicking the cover of Jackson's 1982 album Thriller during his after-hours interview. And if you've seen the picture, Wayne, it is absolutely hilarious. It looks as if it's Ryan Kessel sprawled out in that length-long, white suit, kind of with his legs and in a very provocative type position, just looking at the camera. And it was absolutely hilarious. I was holding back laughter the whole time reading the article.
Yeah, I saw that article. It's hilarious.
Phil the Thriller, Reeves told opponents, told Sportsnet's Scott Oak to explain his choice of attire after the Penguins' 4-2 loss to the Vancouver Canucks. Reeves has developed a special friendship with Kessel since he was acquired by Pittsburgh from the St. Louis Blues for forward Oscar Sundqvist and a first-round pick, number 31, at the 2017 NHL Draft. Reeves dominated Kessel in one-on-one basketball, then scared the bejesus out of him just last week. Reeves revealed that Kessel wasn't his intended target, but that his plan shifted after learning that Kessel doesn't like pranks. Phil, right before that, told me he hates getting scared. He also hates scary movies, Reeves said. So obviously, I switched the target to him.
Of course. Typical hockey player fashion.
Then Reeves uttered the line that will endear him with hockey fans everywhere. Who doesn't love Phil, he said. And isn't that the truth?
The hilarious thing is just seeing him being interviewed on the set of Hockey Night in Canada, and he's wearing a T-shirt, and it's got the album cover of Michael Jackson's Thriller is an iconic. I mean, anybody who's over the age of basically 15 has seen that cover before. Michael Jackson laying in his white suit.
Yeah, with the hair all gel.
With the hair all jelly. That iconic Thriller album. They take that album and put Phil Kessel's face on covering Michael Jackson. See the rest of Michael, in that sexy pose, right? See Phil Kessel. Freaking hilarious.
I'm telling you, Wayne, when I saw it, I nearly spilled coffee or water or whatever I was drinking all over the place. I could barely stop laughing at that article. It was that funny to see that picture.
That was funny.
Yep.
All right. My pick of the week is not really that funny at all. It's just some information. And it also pertains to the NHL, so I could have used this as my AHL or minor league hockey minute as well. The NHL announced this week that they are bringing some games to the NHL Network. So everybody who has NHL Network will be able to watch some American Hockey League games, which I like because I looked into getting the AHL online streaming package, and holy cow, is it ridiculously overpriced.
Really?
It's like $369 for the year for every game. Kind of like what we pay for the NHL, right? $369. And I've read some of the reviews, and a lot of the streams are very, very low quality, low def. Not very strong in terms of quality and sound and video. So as much as I'd like to have that is a ridiculous price to charge for minor league hockey, as far as I'm concerned. And basically the only people that are going to be paying it are scouts, as far as I'm concerned. So, because they have to watch the games. But anyway, that aside, they are bringing some games to the NHL Network, and they released the schedule earlier this week. And unfortunately, I looked at the schedule, and almost all of the games, well over half of them, include the Toronto Marlies. So,
who are playing very well this year?
Yeah, they're playing very well, but you would think they would spread it around a little bit. But I get it. Toronto Marlies are extremely popular in Toronto and Ontario. They've got a huge following. Of course, any hockey that played at a high level in Toronto is going to be popular anyway. But But yeah, you've got the first game starts on Sunday, November 19th. That's the Syracuse Crunch at Toronto Marlies at 4 Eastern. Then you've got, Wednesday the 29th, Sunday the December 17th, January 21st, February 21, February 28, March 11, March 12, March 25, and April 5th are all the games. So about 1 or 2 games a month, you're going to see an American Hockey League game on the NHL Network. And, of course, most of them are involving the Marlies. They're all in the Eastern Conference, every one of those games. So sorry, Western Conference. If you are a fan of a Western Conference American Hockey League team, you are not included in this schedule at all. It's all Eastern Conference.
I got to tell you something, Wayne.
Yeah.
I fiddled around one night, and I'm going through the channels on the sports area of my TV, and I came across an AHL broadcast of the Charlotte Checkers. Only this was back when they were at Time Warner Cable Arena.
Okay.
Which is now this Spectrum Arena. And
where the NBA's Charlotte Bobcats play.
Where the Bobcats play, that's correct. And I actually said, well, this would be kind of interesting. I mean, let me see that. I've never watched the Charlotte Checkers game on TV. Terrible sound quality.
Yep.
Terrible picture. It was really bad. So I don't know if they got it straightened out since they came to the Bojangles Coliseum. But you wouldn't sit down and watch a whole game of that. It just wasn't good quality.
Yep.
So it's in line with what you say.
Yeah, and for the folks that are bringing the online streams for American Hockey League games. If you really want to get more fans watching your games, they've got to find a way to bring that price down, because $300+ is a ridiculous price to pay for all access.
Right.
And even if you're buying just one team, it's like $199 or something like that. I don't have the exact prices in front of me, but to me, if you just want to watch one team, you only get 80 games. It's a lot of money for minor league hockey. It really is. It's almost just as cheap to get tickets to go to the game. And I don't know what the end game is there for the AHL to charge that much money. Maybe they're trying to encourage people to show up in the buildings. I don't know, but if you want to grow your game, not everybody can go to every single game. Some of us have work. Some of us have jobs. Right. In the case of myself in particular, I work retail, so that means a lot of nights and weekends. So I get to miss out on a lot of this stuff, and I don't get to go to games. If it was my choice, I would be at every Carolina Hurricanes and every Charlotte Checkers game in person. Right. But I don't have that option because, well, A, the money, and B, the time. But make it affordable to at least stream online, especially if you're going to be feeding it in poor quality, as I've heard. I don't know firsthand if that's the case, but that's what I've heard anyway. So, all right, that was it for my pick of the week. Okay.
Very good.
So I think we're done.
I think we're finished tonight, Wayne.
So next scheduled stream is going to be Thursday the 16th, tentatively. I don't know about you, Steve, but I think we need to do it earlier in the day because I'm working an overnight that night, so I want to get it done and over with.
Okay.
As early as possible. So as early as you can possibly get home and get to your computer is when I'm going to want to record that day, because I won't be working during the day. I go into work at 10 o'clock that night.
Oh, God.
And working until 6 that next morning. So, yeah, there's that. All right. Okay. So just reminding everybody that you can get us everywhere podcasts are gotten, anywhere from iTunes, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, SoundCloud, Stitcher, you name it. We're everywhere. Android, Apple apps that do podcasts everywhere. You can listen to us right on our show at thehockeynuts.com. You can also listen to us at thehockeywriters.com. They have a podcast channel or podcast page that lists a whole bunch of podcasts. You can listen to us there. If you want to get involved in the show, you can email us at feedback@thehockeynuts.com. You can tweet us at WayneHalley9 or at sball504man. You can reach us through our Facebook page at facebook.com/thehockeynuts and our YouTube channel at thehockeynuts.com/YouTube. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up, and unless you have anything else to add, we're going to go ahead and kill it.
I hear you, Wayne. You have a good week this week. Good doing podcasts with you again. And we look forward to talking to you next week, and good luck to your Bruins.
Yeah, and you too with your Rangers.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Good night, Wayne.
All right. All right, fantasy hockey fans, this is your fantasy hockey report for period 5, which is Monday, October 30th through Sunday, November 5th. Let's start out this week with looking at the performances of the week as scored by our official fantasy hockey league, the Black Bear Fantasy Hockey League, which is being managed using CBS Sports Fantasy Hockey Commissioner. Nick Leddy, defenseman for the New York Islanders, had the best week in terms of fantasy hockey points. He had 38.2 points thanks to his 2 goals, 3 assists in just 3 games played. Max Pacioretty was number 2, left winger for Montreal Canadiens. He had 38.1 points last week with his 6 points in 4 games played. Kevin Shattenkirk was number 3, defenseman for the New York Rangers. He had 4 points in 3 games last week, finishing with 32.2 fantasy points for the week. Coming up fourth, John Tavares with another strong week with 5 points in 3 games and 31.7 fantasy points. And then our 5th strongest player of the week last week, Nathan McKinnon, center for the Colorado Avalanche, with 6 points in 3 games, a goal and 5 assists. He ended up with 30.7 fantasy points for the week. Now taking a look at goaltenders for the week. Corey Crawford, goaltender for the Chicago Blackhawks, was the strongest goalie of the week with a 2-1 record with 2 shutouts in 3 games, putting up 32.3 fantasy points for the week. Henrik Lundqvist was number 2 last week with a 3-0 record and putting up 28.9 fantasy points for the week. And Sergei Bobrovsky was number 3, putting up 2 wins in 3 games played with 27.5 fantasy points for the week. Number 4 last week, Martin Jones, goaltender for the San Jose Sharks, ended up with 3 wins last week in 3 games played and finishing with 23.8 fantasy points last week. And our 5th strongest goaltending performance last week, Connor Hellebuyck, goaltender of the Winnipeg Jets, coming out with 2 wins last week in 3 games played and 23.05 fantasy points for the week. Now let's take a look at the individual performances season to date. Let's start with goaltenders this time around. So far this year, Andrei Vasilevskiy, goaltender of the Tampa Bay Lightning, with his 12-1 record with 1 shutout, has 117.9 fantasy points so far. Number 2, Jonathan Quick, with 110 fantasy points, thanks to his 9 wins. Frederik Andersen, goaltender, Toronto Maple Leafs, number 3, with his 9 wins in 15 games. He has 101 fantasy points for the year. Mike Smith, goaltender of the Calgary Flames, thanks to his 8 wins in 14 games, has 99.6 fantasy points for the year. And then our number 5th, actually we have 2 goalies tied at number 5 with 95 fantasy points. Corey Crawford for the Chicago Blackhawks and Jake Allen for the St. Louis Blues. And it's to be no coincidence that the top 5 or 6 goalies are all on teams that are off to very good starts this year. Now let's take a look at the individual skaters for the year-ending totals so far this year. Number 1 continues to be Nikita Kucherov, for the right winger for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's got 26 points in 16 games. That equates to 124 fantasy points. Number 2 this year so far, Alex Ovechkin, left winger of the Washington Capitals, 18 points in 16 games, but 13 of those are goals, which gives him a total of 116.4 fantasy points so far this year. Number 3, Steven Stamkos, center for the Tampa Bay Lightning, 28 points in 16 games, very assist-heavy for him. He has 115.9 fantasy points. Number 4, Alex Pietrangelo, defenseman for the St. Louis Blues, 15 points in 16 games. Of course, defenseman's point scoring is a little on the heavy side, or fantasy or goals and assists are worth more for defensemen, so it doesn't take as many to add up. But he comes in at 4th at 113.4 fantasy points, and 1/10 of a point behind him at 113.3 is Kevin Shattenkirk, defenseman for the New York Rangers. Now let's take a look at the fantasy hockey results for week 5 last week. Fight for Fighting played Ice Holes last week and lost 160-84. Donut Shop, that is the Mile 40 Saskatchewan Donut Shop, played and beat the Motherpuckers 185-176. Battle Blades and Hageman Hilltoppers had one of the closest games of the year so far, with the Hageman Hilltoppers coming out on top 180-176. Frozen Pogies got their 3rd win of the year on the backs of Mr. Hockey, beating them 212-187. Sneaky Stat Weasels continues their perfect season so far this year with a 200-141 win against Purple Haze. The Kessel Run won big over Jammer 4, 181-125. And in the final game of the week, Pucks for Brains beat the Rat Bastards 197-168. Now, if we take a look at the standings in the Black Bear Fantasy Hockey League, Mile 40 Saskatchewan Donut Shop, is on top of the Wayne Gretzky division with a 4-1 record, followed by the Hageman Hilltoppers at 3-2, Fight for Fighting and Jammer 4 both at 2-3, and then tied for 5th and or last place, Motherpuckers, the Rat Bastards, and Battle Blades all at 1-4. In the Gordie Howe division, Sneaky Stat Weasels sits atop all by themselves at 5-0, the only perfect team so far in the league. Ice Holes sitting at 4-1 in second place. And in third place, Purple Haze, Pucks for Brains, and Frozen Pogies are all tied with a 3-2 record, followed by Mr. Hockey with a 2-3 record, and the Kessel Run bringing up the rear at 1-4. All right, let's take a look at some of the players that are free agents in our league and therefore may be free agents in your league. Sitting atop of the free agent list in our league, Jason Demers continues to be a free agent defenseman for the Arizona Coyotes. He's got 8 points in 17 games so far this year, and in our league has 59.3 fantasy points. Yanni Gourde, left winger for the Tampa Bay Lightning, is also available with 11 points in 16 games. Tim Heed, defenseman for the San Jose Sharks, with 7 points in 12 games. Josh Manson, defenseman for the Anaheim Ducks, 6 points in 15 games. Michael Grabner, right winger for the New York Rangers, 9 points in 17 games. Justin Abelkader, left wing for the Detroit Red Wings, 9 points in 16 games. As far as goaltenders, in our league, Jimmy Howard continues to be a free agent. He is at 6-5 so far this year through 12 games with a 2.48 goals against average, 927 save percentage. Brian Elliott is also having a fairly decent season, 9 games played, 5-3 record, 3.11, 892 save percentage, although those numbers don't look all that great. Yaroslav Halak, goaltender for the New York Islanders, is at 5-3 through 9 games played, 282 goals against average, 906 save percentage. And in our league, the final goaltender that's probably worth looking at would be James Reimer, goaltender of the Florida Panthers. Although with Roberto Luongo back, chances are Reimer's not going to be playing as much anymore. But through 9 games, he's 3-4 so far this year. And speaking of Roberto Luongo, he is back, but he is sitting at 1-3. So I wouldn't recommend picking him up anytime soon. And he's played 6 games so far this year. Now, in terms of players that are trending this week in our league, Yanni Gourde, left winger for the Tampa Bay Lightning, has seen his popularity increase by 18% over the past week. Tim Heed, defenseman for the San Jose Sharks, has gone up 17% in terms of being added and dropped in leagues around the world. Charlie Lindgren, goaltender for the Montreal Canadiens, is sitting at a 14-point increase over the past week. And that's thanks to him filling in for Carey Price in Montreal. And he has been playing very well for them while he's been filling in. Jason Demers, defenseman for the Arizona Coyotes, has also had a 10% increase in ownership over the past week. As far as players being dropped, Vadim Shipachyov, goes without saying, has had a 9% decrease. He's been dropping steadily over the past several weeks as he is no longer an NHL player. He is headed back to Russia. So if you still have him on your team, drop him and drop him quickly. You're not going to be able to get anything for him. Another player that is going to be dropped on a fairly regular basis, Kyler Yamamoto, right winger for the Edmonton Oilers. He's been very popular in the early season, but he was sent down to his junior team, so there's no need to keep him anytime soon. Marcus Johansson, left winger for the New Jersey Devils, has also seen significant drop in ownership thanks to him being put on IR. And that is all for this week's Fantasy Hockey Report. Good luck in your team this week, and we will see you next week.